Coming to you live from the court of King Brian, somewhere probably in the Gaff of Dunlow. It's this week's Apocalypse. I'm your co-host, Kevin Lenihan. With me, as always, is John Ferris. John, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. I think we've got a bit of an advantage this week.
How so?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like our home turf now. You know, it's we bit the, you know, we should be able to deal with.
We've never been that far from home, really. It's just that, yeah. I mean, this is something that we've been, I guess, exposed to in a lot of ways
from childhood,
from a very young age. Yes, I would say. Yeah, maybe that's true. I hope that's true. Although, you know, well, if we get down to it, we'll just say that. Well, they've, as in the parlance of the folk themselves, they've put the come hither on us.
Oh well, that's true.
And here we are.
The only thing I can think of, which might be a problem, is, you know, from word of mouth, you get a bit of that, you know, a bit of some lies will get thrown in there, and then so you don't know what to believe. So maybe what we've learnt as children isn't true. So, you know, it might help to watch some official videos on the subject.
These are officially sanctioned educational videos about how to deal with the fair folk of the Emerald Isle.
Like all movies are, yep.
Yes, indeed, like all movies are, yes, as far as we know. I mean, they wouldn't let them put them out if they weren't true. No, of course. So in an effort to free ourselves from the come hither and to get out of this, are we using the term leprechauns? Is that an offensive term?
Well, leprechauns are part of the fairy folk. You could.
They're in there. It's a bit broad. Maybe that's like a specific thing. But let's just say
because the fairy folk do. Like, yeah, it encapsulates quite a lot. Like you've got your changelings, you've got your pukas.
That's goat people to anyone who's not diverse, anyone who's not sort of savvy with the the colloquialisms.
We kind of trickster type and leprechauns are definitely part of that. So yeah, like specifically in one of these movies, we can definitely use the term leprechaun.
Oh, 100%. There is no doubt. One of them is definitely about leprechauns. Yeah. But let's just say the fairy folk of the woods.
Yeah.
and the countryside of Ireland in general.
So maybe so we don't offend anyone and get an even worse come hither put on us.
Indeed, we don't want to piss off a leprechaun.
We're not. You're not allowed to use that word.
No, that's our word. Oh no! Right. So the films that we have. Let's see now. I've definitely written the name of this director wrong because he's definitely not called Corin. His name is Corin Hardy. So the first one we have Corin Hardy's The Hallow.
I prefer Corin Horan's The Hallow.
Corin Horan. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so we have Corin Hardy's The Hallow from 2015. We have Robert Stevenson's Darby O'Gill and the Little People from, I believe that's from 1959.
Yeah.
It's a real historical one there. I assume historically accurate as well.
It's kind of informed about how people view the Irish, I think, from then on.
Indeed, yes. And then we have Lee Cronin's The Hole in the Ground from 2019, which is the most recent one of our three. So let's plow through this now and see if we can figure out a way to escape their terrible demonic little clutches. Okay, so let's start off then with Corin Hardy's The Hallow, not Corin Horan's The Hallow, because he's not real, I think. Corin I nearly did it again. Corin Hardy's The Hallow. John, what did you think of The Hallow?
This actually might be easier just if we get him to change his name. It might be easier for you.
It'd be better for me, anyway. The problem is that I still have it written down as Corin Horan, so that's going to cause problems.
Well, we'll know from now on. Corin Horan,
Indeed.
we'll know who you're talking about.
Indeed. Well, what did you think of his film, The Hallow?
I thought it was it was okay. I thought it took a while for it to kind of really get any traction and to get going. Our old friend facing problems. But once it kind of like the kind of latter end of the movie's pretty entertaining, and the special effects, the beasties look well for the most part. Again, there's some kind of jankiness to some of the shots, but I thought overall it was okay. I don't know if I'd watch it again. Is the thing.
I think I enjoyed it conceptually. I have like a sort of a bit of a fascination with folklore in general.
Yeah,
and it is nice to see when someone tackles it in a way that's like, I don't want to say scientific, but they do a little bit of that in this.
Yeah, I mean they do the same thing. He brings up by he I mean the main character, our protagonist, Adam. Is it Adam? I think it is. He
yes,
brings.
We're
having real trouble with names today.
No, that's what his wife shouted at him all through the film. So I'm assuming that's his name is Adam. Yes. So he's
you think she knows his name?
I do.
Okay.
I suspect that his wife knows what his name is. Yes. So his whole thing is that like he is a surveyor.
Yeah.
He's an Englishman who has come to Ireland they're putting through a new road. It seems through the old forest, and as is traditional in Ireland, even today you'll get this happening. A few years ago there was a TD, which is the Irish equivalent of an MP, who made the claim that the reason that the roads were so bumpy and needed so much maintenance is that the roads had been built through fairy rings, and that the fairies were angry and they were mucking up the roads. And he said that with a straight face and meant every word of it.
And the sad thing is, I know you're not lying, and I know this happened.
Yep.
And it doesn't even faze me. It's like,
it
of course
seems perfectly normal. And I assume he's still probably in office. People probably continue to vote for him.
He probably has more people voting for him now.
Aye, he probably got a big boost from that. So yeah, the whole thing with this movie is that there's this Englishman who's come in to do some surveying for a month or two, and like mark which trees need to be taken down, which the best route it is to take through this forest for the road to go. And along the way, he has his wife and his relatively newborn son with him.
It's a potato person. It's a baby.
It's a wee baby. It's a wee baby. They don't get specific about how old the wee baby is, but it's not walking.
Yeah,
you know that it's small enough to not be walking. So he's probably only 3 months old.
It is nothing but a burden on its parents.
No, okay, rein it in there.
It's all in good fun.
That's not the kind of little people we're concentrating on today. Okay?
Right. Okay, right. I need to change my whole approach to this whole thing now.
Yes, you do. Right. So that's his whole thing. So yeah, they approach. He's like, I don't know if they get into what his qualifications are, but he's putting things under microscopes. Yeah, it's a fungal sort of thing that he finds.
He brings up the whole idea, and anyone who's played the video game franchise The Last of Us will know what this is, but the cordyceps, which is an actual thing in nature where these spores infect ants and spiders and kind of smaller creatures like that, and basically the plant grows in their brain and kind of directs them a bit. They're pretty much plant zombies, which is what happens to humanity in The Last of Us. And this is it. Like there's a really obvious bit of foreshadowing in this movie where he brings this up because he's watching something on it, and the wife's asking him about it, and you're pretty much going, oh right, okay. So that the way it kind of goes through it, and him explaining the cordyceps, you're like, right, yeah. So I know exactly that this is going to happen at some point in the movie, and yes, it definitely does.
The fact that he talks about it for no reason, you're like, okay, well, this is going to be definitely related to what happens later. Yeah, because why else would you just bring this up out of nowhere?
It's the equivalent of like a very close-up shot to a knife or something like that in a scene, and you're like, oh, someone's going to get stabbed by that. So it's like a knife being positioned somewhere that it normally doesn't. It's like, okay, why are we getting shown that?
Yeah, why is this knife going to happen? Oh, right, that knife's going to get buried in someone by the time we get through Act 2. Yeah. Yeah, so in this movie, they mix mythology a little bit with the him being, I guess, a botanist maybe, or into trees in some way. He knows about funguses, and he looks at this fungus.
This might just be another case of he's a movie scientist, so therefore he knows all science.
Indeed, yes, he's like
movie science has no specialty.
The lady from Species, who they said she was a molecular biologist, and that just meant she knew about everything that they needed her to know about. Whereas he just sort of knows about tree things, I suppose.
Seems to.
They keep a lot of the mythology stuff in there, though. I mean, they have the whole thing where like the locals are warning them about things, or it's implied that the guy from the farm down the road has been trying to warn them. And is maybe fed up of warning them. Doing
it very badly, though. He's taken the very aggressive approach, and because when you first meet Claire, who is the female protagonist, she's taken the iron off the windows, and anyone who knows their fairy lore and the things about elves and creatures like that will know that iron is a good defense against them. They don't like iron. It burns them.
Indeed. It burns their skin, and they don't like even like being near it.
Yeah.
Which is the idea that whenever they move into the house, there's iron that has been strapped sort of across the inside of the windows.
Yeah.
And she is just like, what's all this crap? And takes it down.
And then, of course, the neighbour, Colin, I think you call him, he comes round and is all like, oh, don't be doing that.
Yeah, well, he says, he doesn't just say, don't be doing that. He says, yeah, what? Put the iron back up. And then he's basically just saying, and also go away.
Yeah, put the iron back. Yeah, get the fuck and leave it the way you found it.
Yeah, he's he's extremely aggressive. He doesn't really get physically violent, although at one point he is pointing a gun at them. But that's mainly just because he's like, they're chasing you, get away from my house, don't you bring them horrible monsters around here.
Which I think out of spite I probably would have hung around and went, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait here until they raid your house too. You could have been nicer about it.
This means that I am definitely going to die, but you know what, I'm getting one over on you.
Aye. So I guess it's that old traditional Irish thing of don't mess with the forest. Yeah. Or the forest will get you. The things that live in there will get angry.
It comes from like a fairly good place, and I agree with it. I like this idea of like you should respect the forest and these living creatures, but obviously back then they made these things like fairies, and they had these ideas that these otherworldly creatures live there, so that's why you'll get punished, but. Overall, I kind of like this idea of you should try and preserve nature and respect it, and
it's sort of an environmentalist message in there somewhere. I suppose you could.
It's maybe a wee bit too far in one direction, but
yeah, it's you came in here and you spray painted some X's on these trees, so we're gonna get you and your baby. So
now you die.
Yeah, now we're gonna steal your baby because. They do have that sort of the reason the farmer is so aggro about it is that his backstory is that his child went missing at some point. She went into the forest and never came out again.
Yeah.
Which then is referenced later, but it is very sort of it's a horror movie, so they have to like make it sort of creepy and and they do. I think they do a good job with the depiction of, like you were saying, the first half of the movie is quite slow and there's not a lot going on. You get a couple of wee glimpses of what's in the forest.
Yeah, there's actually a really good shot which I think they ruin with the stinger music in it, where he goes out and this might be the first time you kind of properly see one, and when I say properly see one of these creatures, it is a glimpse, and he's going out with the camera and it's pitch dark and he keeps taking pictures, and there's a flash of a creature just like standing right there. But what annoys me is this as I say, this stinger music that plays that just goes just kind of ruins it for me. I was like, that would have been so good without that noise.
Yeah, like the camera flash and seeing the eyes and what you think, oh, is that a face in the bushes?
Yeah.
Flashing for a second would have been well enough. But yeah, they felt
There's
like
actually there's actually a better, or for me anyway, a scarier scene not long after that where he goes into, it's like a big shed that they have. It's where the generator and all is. That plays into the story later. But
as soon as someone has a generator, you know something's. They know that at some point they're going to need the generator, and the generator isn't going to work.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to work, and oh no. But just as he's coming out of the door, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it looks like a figure is in the background. And I've said before, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, of the more subtle, like,
I love that,
things in the background, and that creeps me out more because that gets under your skin. That's something that you feel after a good horror movie. If you have to go outside to bring the bins in the pitch black after seeing a horror movie, you will be sitting there. You have that.
What if something's on the edge of my vision and I didn't really notice it until it was too late? Yeah.
You know, not a.
Yeah, it's not going to jump out, and there's not going to be suddenly like a shrieking violin pitch. Yeah,
because that would probably anger you more. You'd actually you'd be able to react. You know, you'd punch or something.
Yeah. You hear that loud, horrible sound, and then you're just like amped and defend yourself. Whereas you expect one of these things to be creeping up on you.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of bit of a problem in this movie. Is like it's no different to like 98% of horror movies, but it relies a bit too heavily on these jump scares. In fact, the very last shot is a jump scare.
It is, and it was my god, it's like
really pathetic.
It's not even part of the narrative or the story even. It's literally just a screaming face cut in for the last shot.
Yeah. That actually really annoyed me.
That was aggravating.
I was trying to be kind of nice to the movie, like kind of thinking at that point, it's going through these credits and it's going, it wasn't that bad. It was okay, and then that happened. I was like, you know what, fuck you.
I mean, I like the aspect of like when they do sort of hint towards the folkloric things, like whenever these creatures are sort of trying to get in their house, they're coming after the baby, and there is that whole sort of changeling thing that they are leaning on, where that guy's daughter that disappeared years before, and the reason he's so angry about like people coming in and upsetting the forest is that happened to him. It's like she is still out there, but she's become much like in the changeling lore. I think that is one of the things in changeling lore, is that they'll take a child, and if you don't rescue it within so long, it will become one of them. It will become a fairy, or a goblin of the woods or whatever. So
I'd imagine it's some kind of before the next full moon or some crap like that. But
yeah, it's usually there's in Irish folkloric stories, there's usually a ticking clock deadline of do this before the cock crows for the third time or something. So
actually that's more
before the third morning from now, or or like the first harvest moon or something like that. Yeah, it's usually something very rural, something that people would know in the countryside of like a significant event. Or you have to find her before the last grain of the harvest is taken in, or else she'll be one of us forever. So in the context of this, she has disappeared, and then whenever they're on their baby gets snatched from the house and taken out into the forest, and then they go out after her, and he's been stabbed by one of them through the eye, looking through a keyhole, which I saw coming a mile off.
As soon as he goes to as soon as he goes to look in that keyhole, you know it's just going to happen.
Yeah, so he's becoming one of them as well.
Yeah,
sort of.
So again, that's the callback to the cordyceps video that he's watching and explaining. Is that's what's happening to him? He's kind of been infected. In fact, he kind of mutates a bit. He starts getting like wee branchy bits out his shoulders, and his eye starts kind of looking more like the. At this point, you've kind of seen the monsters a bit to kind of recognize what their eyes are like.
Yeah. So you see that he's changing, and that then we see later when they go after the kid in the forest, we see that has also happened to that guy's daughter. You see like one of them that's like wearing like a pink coat.
Yeah.
And sort of still kind of looks like a human child, sort of. And it's got
I don't want to know what children using.
Okay, well maybe it doesn't look that much like a human child.
It looks like a melted puppet.
It does like it. You know what, John? I think it is a melted puppet. Is what we're seeing. Yes, I think you're right.
Which now that you said is what children look like.
Oh my gosh, John, you're just having a go at all the kids today, aren't you?
Sorry, I need to. I'm trying to get on the other track of like the little people that we're talking about, or the fairy folk. So
you were too set in your ways of verbally attacking children for some reason,
as is my want.
Okay, as apparently is, yes. So, so we get that sort of view of this is the consequence. Once they've stolen the child, and then you see that other child and what happened to them, and that's like, now we know. Yeah. They're stealing children. Whether or not it's because of the encroachment or whether it's just we're monsters and we're just doing this isn't necessarily made clear.
Because it's going more the kind of, for want of a better word, scientific route with the Lord. It's not going magical as it's kind of steering clear from the fantasy side of things, so to speak. It does seem like they are just kind of monsters because Colum's daughter Cora, who we were talking about, who's there and she's all changed up, she just wandered in there, so it couldn't have really been them taking the revenge out on her or her dad because he's literally just a farmer there. Yeah, and you assume that he's come from a line of farmers who
respected the little folk and maybe know not to do all these things, and why would they suddenly want his kid?
Especially because he actually gives Claire the Book of Invasions to, and it ends up in Adam's hands. He's reading about it. It's telling all about the fairy folk and things like this and the changelings. So this kind of just to kind of give a bit of exposition, and so they know what they're dealing with. Because otherwise, how else could they really learn about this?
Yeah, they need to be told this stuff, because they're like they're English outsiders. Yeah, which is a traditional thing in Irish fiction in a lot of ways. Of all the English come in, and then that upset everything, and that's why the fair folk are angry. You know, that's been a thing for a few hundred years.
Still a bit of a chip on our shoulders.
Apparently so. It would seem certainly the people who wrote this film felt that way. But I do like the look of the creatures when you do see them. They look all right. There's a really good scene. I say a really good scene. There's a scene that I enjoyed, certainly, where he's trying to get his car started.
Yes.
And the car won't start, and then he opens up the engine thing, and it's covered in weird. I guess this changeling fungus that he's been finding everywhere has somehow got all up on the inside of his car and is choking the engine. And he's trying to fix the car, and the whole family's in the car. They're trying to get away. Yeah. And she's cranking the engine. He's trying to fix it, and you get this really good, again in the background sort of thing of every time she cranks the ignition and the brake lights on the back of the car come on, it sort of bathes the place in this red light, and then you can sort of see them all among the trees and on the hills all around, just sort of watching. And then every time she cranks it, they're all, they're getting closer. Yeah. They're getting closer. They're getting closer. I really like that. That's the first time you really get a proper look at what all their faces and stuff look like. And, and they look like they sort of look like weird tree people. In a way, I guess they're trying to push the fungus angle with that. Yeah. Because they look like they've got little branches and stuff sticking out of them here and there and things like that. So I think the effects are actually quite nice. The design of the wee monsters is good.
And when you say wee, they're pretty big.
Some of them are almost adult sized, and some of them are children sized.
Which again is probably from them stealing children and changing them, I would imagine.
Yeah, you'd imagine, because it looks like that little girl, we don't really... It looks like that little girl that's been infected didn't grow up. She stayed that same size. When they see her, she's still a wee kid. So you assume that. But whether or not it teaches us, I mean, it's not really approaching it from a folkloric angle. It does cover the iron thing, quite solidly. With the old, they'll burn it, and that's how you one of the ways to test for a changeling.
Yeah,
is to press something iron against the baby's skin.
And even when Adam starts to change into one of them, it doubles down on that to show you, this isn't just like a physical thing that's happening to him. He's fucked kind of thing, because he reaches for one of the iron bars and it burns him. So then he knows automatically, oh crap,
he has to wrap his hands up.
Yeah.
So that he can handle the iron, because it's literally burning his skin when he touches it.
Yeah.
Which was quite cool. I did appreciate that.
Yeah. And also light. They don't like lights.
Yes, they don't like light, which introduces the whole thing with the generator at one point, where the generator has switched off, and they're all throughout the house. And he has basically abandoned his wife and child to go and fix the generator to make all the lights come on.
Yeah.
And then you have the scene that you could have predicted from the moment you knew they had a generator, where you're like, well, there he is. Of course, now this is happening. He's out trying to get the generator to start, and it won't start.
Yeah.
And they're in the house, and they're going, oh, no. They're at the door. And they're literally looks like they're melting through the trapdoor hatch.
Yeah,
with
it's
their
weird.
saliva or something.
It's like it's rotten. I wasn't sure if they were kind of manipulating the wood of it.
That would be a very fairy folk thing to do.
Yeah, so it was rotten, and it would also explain why later they're able to silently bore a hole through the ceiling to get at the
baby. Because they put the baby in the iron cupboard, which I thought that was fun. That was like, they put the baby in a drawer basically to protect it, and
best place for
it. Get in. Yeah. Well, I mean that's something you would hear for when you hear really old people being I slept in a drawer until I was 2. That's all I could think about when I was seeing that. Is yep. That's a wee jab at the Irish there. Well, it's maybe fair. Putting babies in cupboards.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, it's sort of a bog standard.
Yeah,
monsters in the woods horror film at some point. You know, it's nice to have that extra tinge of the folklore, and they do handle that well enough. But it's a bit too. I've seen this before in a completely different context. With it's almost like it's just got a lick of paint on it to make it look like a fairy story.
Yeah, it's like. Especially they use the Book of Invasions, which I mentioned earlier, and I mean for anyone who doesn't know, that's like this old was the 8th century or something. It was maybe started
it's over 1,000 years ago anyway. Something like that.
It's an old that's the Anglicized title for it.
Anglicized. That's takes sharp turns, does it?
Yep.
Is it anglicized?
Anglicized. But it's a very old text that is kind of the history of Ireland before the English kind of took over.
Yeah, it's when the actual Irish native people were recording the history.
But it's also there's a lot of folklore and a lot of mythology stuff all mixed in. So it's very difficult to kind of read or understand in a sense of what is actual history in it and what
is literal and what is not, because you get a lot of that with Greek historians like Herodotus would do that, where he would write these stories based on things that he had been told, but he would write them in a way. The whole thing with Herodotus was that he didn't write a book to be bought. He was writing a script for himself to go and read dramatically in town squares. So there's embellishment all over the place with stuff like that. And then you have things like Greek mythology, like the Odyssey and the Iliad, where you have real events mixed in with extremely not real events.
Yeah, they like to add these larger than life heroes and
like Odysseus and like Achilles and stuff like that in those texts, who were not real people, who did not exist, but they're in these battles and these wars. Sorry, trying to shatter your worldview there. Yeah, they're in these wars that maybe there was a war that really happened, like Hellenic wars happened, but maybe this sort of siege of Troy maybe didn't happen, or didn't happen like Homer wrote it. Definitely, there wasn't a magical man who could only be killed by getting an arrow in the foot. Like, I mean, that's not a thing. Probably,
it's a pretty damn cool story though.
Aye,
but yeah, that's the same, and we've both been interested. We like our fantasy fiction and things like that, but and that all stems from this kind of like every country has their own mythologies. Every country has their own interesting folklore. There's the collection that Andrew Lang spent, I think, his entire life collecting of just folk tales of different countries and things like that. And you'll find a lot of these, a lot of them predate the likes of the Grimm stories. And a lot of theirs are just kind of continuations almost, or embellished versions of these folk tales. And it's just very interesting. I think it does. I think it shapes kind of the people of that culture as well in a lot of ways. Yeah,
because a lot of these stories are handed down from parent to child.
Yeah,
and they're maybe telling a story that they remember that their mum and dad or their grandmother told them, and maybe to suit that specific child they're talking about, they change a wee thing here and there, and then that kid tells that version of the story to someone else, and that changes in a similar way, and then by the time you get to the modern era, you have like 15 different things where you're like, wait, so does iron actually work, or is it this other thing, or do I need to go and crack 2 eggshells and fill them up with water, and what, which is a thing about changing things as well.
Yeah.
So there's a hell of a lot of like weird conflicting things that you'll get with all this kind of stuff, which get addressed more in one of the other movies that we're going to talk about. That is very much leans into the mythology way more than this film does.
Yeah.
Again, as this film feels like it could have been set anywhere.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. This could have been in Romania. Anywhere that has woods, this movie could have happened. It didn't need to be Ireland, I don't think.
And they don't make the creatures in it aren't distinct enough as kind of as fairy folk in that sense.
No.
Like, I think that's what we're getting at, is that, you know, I think it does lose a lot because it is so broad and it feels like it's just a generic monster in the woods.
It does. Yeah, it doesn't. They don't feel like they are from Irish folklore necessarily.
Yeah.
This could be Romania. This could be America.
Yeah.
You know, this could be happening in the woods of Wisconsin or whatever.
I mean, the only thing that really makes them stand out as Irish is that they're attacking the only English couple. And
yeah, that is that. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but that's a very Irish thing, I suppose. They're the only English people within a 30-mile radius, so they're picking on them. We got a bone to pick with you, lad.
By the way, English listeners, that's not true. Feel free to come round.
Yeah,
we're all very nice.
That probably won't actually happen. People are pretty chill these days, especially in the Republic.
You just have to clarify that, though, because you never know what people really think of different places.
Yeah. So, I think that's the hole in the ground. Not the hole in the ground, sorry. No. I just want to talk about the hole in the ground. That's my problem.
The Hallow, I believe.
Yes, I believe it's...
Do you want to...
Yes, if I can say his name right and his film right, I'll be doing well. Corin Hardy. So that's Corin Horan's hurling a
The Hallow in the ground.
Yes. Right, well, I think we need to get a move on here because some of these wee fellas are talking about some kind of ritual or something, and they keep giving us the side eye and laughing. So we really need to get shifting. So we're going to move on to our second film, which is Robert Stevenson's Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which is just a title and a half for a film. It tells you everything you need to know, I think, about the movie when you hear that. So
a title and 3/4.
Indeed. So, John, what did you think of Darby O'Gill and the Little People?
Well, this is definitely a movie that we grew up with from the very start, basically, because I mean, it was made in 1959, and I can't help but love it. It's just It's not to say it doesn't have its problems. It definitely does.
Oh, they are myriad.
Yeah. But I think it's a fairly well crafted, and it's a Disney movie. It is very I don't know the word I'm looking for. It's maybe a bit broad.
Saccharine, sanitized, broad works, I think.
Yeah.
It's not like they're not narrow casting. They've got a very stereotypical view of the rural people of Ireland, which
is only half true.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's completely inaccurate, given my experience.
And but some of the lines they come up with are brilliant, and
some of the things they say.
I can hear them being said in these rural towns.
Yeah, you can almost hear your granny saying it.
I can hear my mum saying some of this stuff. Well, time enough lost the ducks. What does that mean? What does that mean, you mad woman?
Time enough lost the ducks. Or, well, my favourite one, which is one that I actually would have heard before this movie, was "How you're wished."
Aye, how you're wished.
Basically means shut up or be quiet or go on.
There's another one that I really liked, which I for some reason I only noticed this time round of watching Darby O'Gill and the Little People was he's blue molded for want of a beating. which I thought's fantastic. As soon as I heard it, I was like, I want to use that now. I want to use that.
That's brilliant. He's blue molded for want of a beating. Oh, it's fabulous. That's great. Oh, I love that. That is brilliant. You're right.
I think if you go into this movie with the right frame of mind, then you will enjoy it. You will.
Yeah.
There's a lot there to enjoy. It's almost more of a comedy than it is anything else.
Yeah, I mean it's built in a lot of ways. It's built. I mean it is produced by Disney in the late 50s.
Yeah.
So it's definitely built for children to enjoy. You know, it's an adventure movie with lots of silly things going on. It's got some extremely lighthearted music, but it has some like really scary parts in it too. For me as a child, anyway. It's
got some very dark. I mean. The kind of most infamous part of it is the Banshee, which I think everyone our age or everyone who's seen this as a kid will say the Banshee scared the bejesus out of them.
Oh, I was traumatized by it. When I was a kid, I was traumatized by that Banshee.
And it's kind of funny. You look at it now and you'll kind of go, you can kind of see through it now, and they kind of go
both literally and figuratively.
It maybe some of the effects obviously haven't aged well. I mean, you have to give it a break. It was literally made in the 50s.
Some of them haven't aged well, and some of them really have.
The forced perspective stuff is amazing.
Like all the stuff where someone is talking to a leprechaun or in a place. Anytime Darby is in a place with leprechauns, like. Now, because I've watched, say, the extra features on the Lord of the Rings extended editions and stuff, they did a lot of stuff with the hobbits in that. Yeah, whenever
it's very good. It's a lot of scenes that I just assumed were CG, or there was a bit of computerized effects going on. It's unbelievable, and it adds so much more when it is done with that forced perspective, but.
Yeah, because you don't see. I mean, the problem with CG is that you very often see the seams. Yeah. You very often see, oh well, they're clearly not in the room together, and they're clearly. But in this or in the Hobbit scenes with hobbits in Lord of the Rings, you will have a set built in such a way that someone will be standing very close to the camera and someone else will be standing very far away from the camera, but they've built the set in such a way that it looks like they're standing right next to each other. Yeah. And they've done that in this. And it really like shocked me in a way. I was looking at it going, he looks like he's really there talking to King Brian. And then I found myself looking for it. I found myself trying to figure out, how did they build this set to make it look like that? And at points I was baffled. I was just looking at it going, I don't know how they did that in 1959, because it looks really good. Because like this guy's like a small guy in the foreground.
Yeah.
Like, and he's supposed to be talking to someone who's fully human-sized, who's in the background, and it looks like that's what's happening. But
Yeah.
that guy's standing. That guy must be standing like 20 feet away, looking at the wall or something. And then the other guy that he's talking to is behind him, looking towards the camera where the guy's. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that stuff looks really, really good.
I think they did an excellent job of, tracking people's eyes and heads in it. Making sure, and by that I mean making sure the actors were looking at a specific spot, and so it all matched up. Because, it is. It's very, very well done. It does make you kind of sit back and just realize that a lot of the times you don't need this CGI stuff. This is
there is a practical way to do things now. I think in modern movies, it's cheaper to do the CGI than it is to build a physical thing, and that tends to be why they lean towards that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it makes such a difference when something is real and tangible.
Yeah. I also think it's really unique in the sense, or maybe not unique, but it's very different from a lot of movies in that your protagonist is an old man and is 70s.
Our central character is an incredibly old man who's so old that he is being forcibly retired from his job because he can't do it anymore.
I love the line of his lordship, which is he retired. It's something along the lines, Darby retired 5 years ago, but he just didn't let me know.
Just implying that he's been doing fuck all.
He just sits in the bar telling me stories and all. But again, the actor is so crucial because he needs to be likable. The main thing about Darby O'Gill and the Little People is the character of Darby O'Gill is this lovable kind of rogue. He's such a scamp. He's always trying to first of all he's trying to pull one over on King Brian, the king of the leprechauns, and he's kind of trying to sneak out of work and to have a few pints, and he's just this funny character, and the actor portrays him so well. And the actual actor was he was retired. He used to play in like a theater company and Walt Disney had seen him in this company and had actually been thinking of him all the time for this role. And there was a bit of trouble kind of getting Darby O'Gill made, as there always is with movies. And this guy had already retired. He came out of retirement just for this role, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. I guess that's the only way you get somebody of that advanced in age, especially around that time, to come and be in a high production film. Yeah, like that, and it was all shot, and it was shot in America. Now, did he live in America? Do you think?
No, I think he actually retired. I think he was living back in Ireland, and so they probably had to fly him out. And
that's pretty cool. So so he's great. Yeah, Darby is what makes the whole film work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other characters that are all right. I mean, there's his daughter's okay. She's not that interesting, but she's just. She's all right.
I mean, again, especially for the time, I like that she's not kind of this wee demurred kind of thing.
Yeah, she's no shrinking violet.
No, in fact, at one point they say something. Again, it's just these real witty wee lines they have, and Darby says she should have been the groundskeeper. She has a tongue that could clip a hedge. It's just that kind of sums it up, really.
Yeah, because she's got this thing where they are all about, whoever marries her is going to get his job.
Yeah.
He'll be the one to replace him.
Which is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, which is why our antagonist, Pony Subro, who played ably by Kieran Moore again, who people will maybe remember from being the marine biologist in Day of the Triffids, in which he played an alcoholic Irishman.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if it's implied he's not. No one in this movie is necessarily implied as being alcoholic, except maybe for King Brian. King Brian loves a drink.
Pony Sucro does steal a bottle of whiskey when no one's looking.
He does,
and there is at one point he's asking for whiskey, and they're and everyone in the bar is just refusing. No, get out.
Yeah, it's like he's been cut off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
They
he's
don't
very...
out say it. They never declare anyone to be a slave to the drink or anything like
No.
that. But
Well,
yeah,
well, it's Ireland.
yeah, you just assume.
But he's not. He does do a good job because he's not very likable. Him and his mother Sheila are both kind of very horrible from the get go.
Yeah, they're just sort of fundamentally bad, selfish people.
Yeah,
it seems like, which is grand because he's the antagonist. Although he's not. He's an antagonist. He's not the main antagonist. In many ways, King Brian is the antagonist. I feel like the Leprechaun King himself is almost like him and Darby have this adversarial relationship, which it's common in the folklore of like, you know, a lot of like leprechaun stories are about someone trying to outwit the king or outwit a leprechaun that they've captured, or trying to wish in such a way that the wish can't deliberately be misinterpreted to screw them over, because that's the thing with leprechauns as well. It's like, oh, well, you catch a leprechaun and you get 3 wishes, but you know, usually it doesn't. In the actual old stories, it usually doesn't end well. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that once Christianity came to Ireland, it got mixed in with Christian beliefs to the point where people would then refer to anything connected to the old beliefs as being like the devil or evil and satanic. So you get a lot of that with like, there's a point in this movie where Darby is telling everyone a story about how he captured King Brian, and he outwits him, and he made his 3 wishes for all these things, and he wishes for a crock of gold.
He wished for health. He wished for a big crop of potatoes. Again, really leaning into the stereotypical Irish thing.
You got to bring potatoes up some point.
And then a crock of gold.
Yes, he wishes for the crock of gold last.
Yeah.
And then he's like, right, okay, that's 3 wishes. And then King Brian's like, oh, well, what about your 4th wish? And he's like, what? 4th wish? He's like, oh, sure, I'll give you more wishes. And then there's a whole thing where he starts wishing for crocks of gold for
his mates.
For his mates, the people that he likes, and people that are nice people, which is like kind of a cool thing to do. He's like, he wishes for one for the guy that runs the pub, and basically it's like, now this is him telling this story to the immediate audience, and he is sort of just naming people around the table who are there that he wished for a pot of gold for them. So we don't know if he's telling the truth or not.
Do you think it's a bit of an unreliable narrator type thing?
I absolutely do not trust anything Darby. Much like the people of the village, I like Darby a lot, but I don't necessarily believe anything that he says.
Yeah, because he's got like a. I like that the only ones who are really kind of antagonistic to him in the village seem to be Pony and his crew. He's got like 2 mates.
Yeah, because Pony wants his job.
Yeah.
That's his reason to be a dick to Darby O'Gill. And it just seems like Pony Sugro's just generally a dick to everybody, and nobody likes him.
Yeah, no one really. No, there's no respect for Pony there, and like near the end when he's going off to somewhere else for a job, and everyone's happy. Everyone's like, yeah, go get the fuck.
Yeah.
But Darby, even though he's and again, it's this kind of character that many of us probably know in our real lives. You know, who they'll sit in the bar and tell you a wee yarn, and you know it's a lot of hyperbole in it. You know it's not 100% true, maybe, but they tell it so well that you just go, you know what, fucking you go for it, mate.
Whatever. This is entertaining and fun.
Yeah,
hyperbole.
They'll get a round bought for them. You know, people will buy them a drink because they're the entertainment. They're a bit of crack, and they're just that character. Because
you're like, who cares? I like you like being around them. Yeah, so he tells this story, and you know he's made his 3 wishes, and then he starts telling them how he's basically I wish for a pot of gold for you, and I wish for a pot of gold for you, and I wish for a pot of gold for you as well, and all these great things. And of course, the rub there is that apparently, if you make a 4th wish to a leprechaun, it undoes all of your other wishes. I guess that's like a lesson in greed or whatever. Maybe that was from in the folklore, but in the context of this when he tells them that, and he tells them, "Oh, that undid all my wishes, and that's why I don't have this pot of gold and whatnot."
Yeah.
They start saying things that like, "Oh, well, I wouldn't have taken that from you anyway, because that's the devil's gold," you know, and like that's like Christian myth stuff leaking into the Irish mythology there, of the idea that I guess it was in a lot of ways the way they sort of demonized the old religions. Whenever Christianity came to Ireland, was to make it seem like, oh, it's not that they're worshipping these like pagan gods. It's that, oh no, that's the devil.
Yeah,
that's demonic. What they're doing, it's actually the devil. You know, and that's the reason why, in modern times, when you get this sort of picture of the devil with his cloven hooves and his horns, his goat horns and stuff like that. I mean, they just took that from the mythology of other cultures to make them seem like they were devil worshippers.
Yeah.
To make the Irish seem like they were worshipping, like if they were talking about, oh, like a puka, you know, a puka is a creature in Irish mythology, but you put that in a modern context and people look at that and go, oh, well, that's a demon. Because it's a goat thing walking around on its hind legs.
Yeah, it's unnatural. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Even though the depictions of like what angels actually look like would give you nightmares.
Yeah, the ones that you read in the Bible, when you actually read the Bible and you read about angels, they're horrifying. But then you look at the Sistine Chapel and you're like, well, that's just a bunch of babies with wings. That's not what's in here.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I mean, I don't believe any organized religion, so that it's interesting to look at that as folklore as well, or look at that as kind of its own mythology thing, and it can be used very well for the telling of tales as well.
Indeed, I mean that's what we've done with the old sort of Greek religions now. Is that we look at that as folklore, and we look at the things from those stories. Like we look at.
It's almost difficult to believe that people used to like properly worship Zeus and Athena, and you know these gods. Like you kind of do. You almost forget it and just look at it as entertainment now.
Yeah, like people back then were like, "Oh no, centaurs are real. There is a half man, half horse creature out there, definitely."
Yeah,
or like stuff like the Minotaur from the Labyrinth, you know, from those stories.
Yeah,
like it's like a big muscular, like bull-headed man, you know. But people were like, whenever they were telling those stories, it was like, no, I'm telling you this because this is a real thing.
Yeah,
and I like the story of Pericles and Hercules and people like that, you know. So we call these things folklore now. So it's a silly story, but people believed in these things. People believed in the fair folk of Ireland.
Yeah.
People believed in the banshee. I mean, like my grandfather believed in the banshee.
Oh yeah.
Like my mum would tell me that before his sister died, that he saw a woman in his house crying on the stairs. And like, I mean, I'm not going to second guess people. I mean, people have all kinds of, in times of grief especially, people tend to see things and convince themselves of things, and you hear those kinds of stories a lot. But I mean, he thought he saw the banshee. He told his kids that, you know, that's what he saw. And my mother told me that, you know, and that scared me as well when I was a wee kid.
If you do witness something like that, you're going to really hammer it into your kids, saying, no, this thing is real.
Yeah, if you saw it and you believed it, I mean, there's no reason not to think it. Maybe, I mean, I don't know if he knew much about you know, psychology and stuff, and especially like way back then. I mean, you're talking like when he was a young man, which would have been like the 19-teens, 1920s maybe, you know, and it's like, you know, that's what he saw, and that was it, and that's what you tell people, and there's no reason. Then you're in an environment again where you tell people about that. You say you saw this thing, and someone will tell you, "Oh, that was the banshee," and you'd be like, "What?" And then they tell you about the banshee, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Well, I saw a banshee," and then
it also feeds into what we were saying earlier, where these mythologies, these folklores, do in some way shape how people are in their own kind of cultures. And I mean, even the fact that I find a lot of the Irish ones are very kind of tricks, like wee tricksters. They're not exactly. They're not, very very few of them are like evil. Even the banshee isn't really evil. It just is heralding a death of an important person.
Yeah, there's often a fun element
Yeah.
Which, when you think about it, like, that's the guy down the pub telling the story.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to hear the story. And, like, it's way more fun. You don't want to just hear about, like, cradle-snatching monsters.
No.
You know? You want to hear about this wily wee man that you met in the forest who was trying to get away from you and trick you. And then you outsmarted him and you got your wishes. And then he tricked you and ran away.
But then there is there's some like European ones that that you will find are a bit more strict, and it's more about keeping people in their village. You know, it's like, oh, if you walk out into the woods, you'll get eaten by a fucking thing.
Aye.
And that does tend to, like, even now, you know, certain cultures will be a lot more. Like a study was done years ago. What one was it? It was like people were hooked up to. It was actually an actor was hooked up to what the participant thought was an electric chair, and they had to, like, slowly put more current through.
So they had to increase the voltage because someone in authority was telling them that was the thing that they had to do, and that was fine. And
the likes of you know, places like Germany, where it is very, you know, you have to listen to authority, and they were quite quick, or I don't know how to put it in another way, but they kind of went along with it maybe too far, further than they would have liked to have.
Yeah.
And then other places didn't quite. But it was very interesting because they did it over a lot of different countries and a lot of different cultures to see, is there like an inherent obedience almost, and it kind of showed that there was. I mean, with every psychological study, there is problems with it. There, you know, there's always criticisms to be made for how they did it, but I found it kind of interesting. And it did seem that, because I've read those Andrew Lang fairy tale books, and it tells you where they're from, or some of them are just like as vague as Eastern Europe, because he couldn't pinpoint exact places,
the exact region where they came from, and they maybe spread wide from there. Yeah,
exactly. So, and you know, there's I just found it kind of interesting that, you know, the Irish mythology, it tends to be these puckas and leprechauns, and these be like, just, you know, not evil, just kind of up for a wee bit of a laugh, and like, depending on what mood.
Cantankerous, perhaps. Yeah.
Like,
it's like,
don't trust them fully, but they're generally harmless.
Yeah, they're generally harmless unless maybe don't push it too far.
Yeah.
There's always a sinister element. Yeah, because even bleeds, that aspect does bleed into Darby O'Gill and the Little People in a little bit, because there is a point where Darby O'Gill has fully, like, tricked and captured King Brian.
Yeah.
And I guess in the context of this, and I guess in the context of actual Irish folklore, you only really see leprechauns in the nighttime.
Yeah.
And they're powerless maybe during the day or when they're in sunlight. So he, like, tricks him with his potchine, which is a very Irish way to get somebody to hang around. Is like, here, shall we have a wee drink? So he tricks him with his potchine when he's supposed to be taking him back to the court of King Brian to keep Darby there forever. Yeah. Which again is the thing about leprechauns. Like, he thinks he's doing Darby a favor by holding him hostage, because Darby's complaining about Bill. He's like, well, I'm being replaced.
Yeah.
At my job and have no livelihood now, and like, so he's like, all right, well, I'll put the come hither on you then, and you can come live with me, but like, you're imprisoned. So he doesn't want that. He wants the best for his daughter, really. Yeah. Ultimately is Darby's motivation. So he captures King Brian. He tricks him into staying there until sunrise, basically, and then he uses one of his wishes to basically say, you have to hang around with me for at least 2 weeks, or until I've made all 3 of my wishes.
Yeah.
And then he's bound to do that. But King Brian gets angry at him and makes some threats at that point, which hint at sort of the sinister thing, where he says there'll be a changeling in every crib for 40 miles around Darby O'Gill, and you're like, and like, if you know what a changeling is, they don't get into what a changeling is in the movie, but if you know what a changeling is, that's a really sinister, horrible thing to say. Basically, like, all the babies in the 40-mile radius will be stolen and replaced with horrible monsters. So he makes a bunch of threats there. The kind of
Darby just kind of laughs at him.
Yeah, Darby's just like, whatever. I think Darby is extremely cocky at that point because the sun's come up and he knows that he can't do anything. I think that's Darby likes to get King Brian into situations where King Brian is stuck.
Yeah.
And doesn't have a choice. It happens a couple of times throughout the runtime of the film.
That's it. It's always a battle of wills between the two, but there's a respect, and there's, like, as you say, King Brian literally takes him to the land of the fairies or whatever, his court, because he's looking out for him. It's because they're mates, and Darby O'Gill, he more or less says it. Who's the one that makes sure people respect you and don't throw.
I believe it's they don't throw out their wash water when yous are out walking invisible.
Yeah,
is what he says.
So like King Brian does have a good bit of respect for him, and it is almost like that. Again, another thing I like about this movie is there's no real antagonist of it's more like one of those like miscommunication movies where.
Yeah, it's a series of errors. It's very like a Shakespearean comedy almost, where it's a bunch of people not knowing that they're making mistakes, and that leading to bad things. The only person in the film who is actively antagonistic is Pony Sogro, the village jerk.
Yeah.
And he's mainly out to get Sean Connery's character, who is sort of whatever to me. I think the most interesting characters in the movie are Darby and King Brian.
Well, it is called Darby O'Gill and the Little People, so
yeah,
like they're using they use Sean Connery's character Michael is basically there to fall in love with Darby O'Gill's daughter Katie, and Katie is Darby's kind of. Like everything he's doing is to try and make things grand for her to kind of set her
happiness is the MacGuffin of the film, really. Is that even like the reason Darby O'Gill's doing anything is so that his daughter can have a better life.
Exactly. Yeah. Like even the fact that he accidentally wastes his second wish. So his first wish ties King Brian to him for the 2-week period or until he uses up another 2 wishes. And then he accidentally says, at one point, Michael tackles him during the night.
Oh, he thinks he's a poacher. Yeah,
he thinks he's a poacher. But like, this is Sean Connery in his prime, and he tackles this wee old man. Jesus, how's he still standing? They were made of tougher stuff back then, you see.
Oh, why?
And then he's saying, "Oh no, it's the king of the leprechauns." He shows him into the sack and. King Brian's appearing as a rabbit to him.
Aye.
It's this whole thing of, I can't let you take a rabbit and blah, blah, blah. But he accidentally says, I wish you could see him. And you just hear from the sack, granted.
Yeah, and you're like, that is a really tricksy, typical bloody leprechaun fairy folk thing to do. Is I accidentally said the words "I wish" at the start of this sentence, so now you've just taken that literally. And what? And then he looks in the sack and he still can't see him, and he's like, "Oh, but he does see me as a rabbit." Yeah, like, you cheeky wee fucker, you.
And before this, because Darby's doing quite well. Darby is, he's a clever bugger, like
Aye.
Because when he goes to the bar before, like earlier during this day, and he's about to make a toast, he stops himself and he asks his mates, "Wait, is a toast the kind of wish?" And they go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I'll just leave that then."
Yeah, he's at that point. He's learned his lesson.
Yeah,
he's learned to be incredibly careful with what he says when King Brian's around.
But but even after this, there is a bit of animosity between him and King Brian, and King Brian's getting frustrated. It's like, will you just hurry up and make this wish? Like, how long does it take? Darby just plainly says that it's until he knows. He's trying to find out what Katie wants, or Kitty as he calls her, and that's all he cares about, which is very nice as well.
Yeah.
So then to basically quicken things up, King Brian visits Michael and Katie in their sleep, and tries to make this thing happen, which is kind of weird because it seems like it's already kind of happening anyway.
Yeah, I think the fact is that like there's a ticking clock introduced in that beyond the 2 week period, like of much closer, where King Brian's second in command, Patrick Ogue, is like Patrick Ogue, Patrick Jr., young Patrick, which is essentially what that means. So he's like the guy who's going to be in charge if King Brian is away.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is like, and again, this is from a place of concern for Darby from King Brian, where he's basically saying, look, if I'm not back there, Patrick Ogue is going to start doing some things that are going to put you and your family in danger. So we need to get this sorted out. So yeah, the fact that he's trying to hurry along the third wish so that they can get it sorted, so he can get back to his kingdom, basically, and say, here, Patrick, it's fine. I'm fine. Don't do anything crazy. Yeah. But of course, that doesn't really work out. I mean, that's how we end up towards the end of the film with them essentially luring Katie up the mountain, and then she... Is it ever made clear how she becomes at death's door? I imagine she fell.
Yeah, it looks like she fell, but it never really goes into it. But I suppose when you're talking about fairy folk, it kind of doesn't need to, because it'll just be, it'll be magic, it'll be the come hither and all that, you know.
Yeah.
They put a pox on her or something. You can always explain this shit away whenever it's a fantasy thing of this kind.
Yeah, they just sort of find her in a bush.
Yeah.
And she's lying there on semi-conscious, and I just imagine, because she goes to get the horse in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Which Darby knows that's not their actual horse. That's a puka, because pukas can shapeshift as well. And so because that's how he ended up in King Brian's court earlier in the movie, so he's kind of caught on. And because the way the puka appears to them is just a multicolored horse. Yeah,
the film just sort of inverts rapidly from negative and back to normal color very, 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 very quickly. So you know something funny's going on.
And I find it kind of weird that like pukas, like it's such a good like a creature to use in these things. I'm surprised it doesn't come up more often. I mean, I kind of look at Pan or like those kind of Vaughns as a puka type thing, you know, and Pan's Labyrinth is probably the best example. Yeah. Although you could argue it's not, because I would say it is. But you know, like in movies, they very rarely really come up.
Yeah, they don't. You don't see a lot of puka stuff going on outside of like old texts, really. You don't tend to. Sometimes, again, you'll hear them mentioned in stories, but it's usually like in a leprechaun story, someone will mention a puka. But there's a few stories
or
about
something
pukas,
really like bizarre, like Flann O'Brien's.
Yeah, I was just going to say Flann O'Brien. Yeah,
I'd swim two birds, which is great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. It's great. That's really, really great. And is a great example of pukas.
Yeah.
But I find the puka fascinating. I think the puka is really a really cool, creepy creature.
Because it's one that I kind of came to kind of late. And as far as like, you know, new leprechauns and banshees and all that, elves and you know, fairies and stuff. But puka kind of, I don't think it was from reading Flann O'Brien. I think I'd heard about it before then, but that's kind of what kind of solidified it, I suppose. Yeah,
same thing for me. I mean, I had heard the word before that, and then I read it, Swim Two Birds, and I was like, oh, that's a puka.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And then it just became far more interesting, and I was like, I think the problem is that if, especially in like a visual medium, if you present a creature like that, the first and only thing people are going to think Pan. When they see it is Pan or demon.
Yeah.
You know, like Judeo-Christian demon. Because that's how they've been depicted in an attempt to, I guess, annihilate the culture of other religions by making their demons look like other people's holy creatures.
Yeah.
So yay, hooray! That's which is a negative. It's a negative thing, and it's sort of it's not a fun way to look at it, but it is realistic. That is sort of that's the reality of Irish mythology in a lot of ways.
I think it's time for a change. Come on, everyone! Let's start making movies about nothing but pukas.
I would love a couple of movies about pukas.
Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, goat men, shifting goat men. That sounds great.
Because I do
me.
think Pan's Labyrinth is probably the closest thing you'd get as well,
Yeah.
because it is even I think the important thing for it, and I know we're kind of going off on one here on this. Sorry,
doesn't matter.
But like the main thing I think of about the puka is that you don't know whether to trust it or not. You don't know if it is doing something sinister or if it is looking out for you. And Pan's Labyrinth does that very well. But we're not talking about Pan's Labyrinth now, so let's move on.
Let's move on. I mean, yes, but again, that's something you can say a lot about other Irish folklore things as well. I mean, we've said that already about like a leprechaun. They're cantankerous and mischievous.
Yeah.
But if you push them too far, they will mess you up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they will take people's limbs. They will.
Yeah, he at some point he threatens to give Darby the head of a donkey or something, doesn't he?
He does. Yes. He does. And that's fun. That's funny when you hear that said, but then you think like, well, that's also something terrible to do to somebody. Yeah. So it is quite sinister all around. But it's mostly done very lighthearted in this film.
Yeah.
Towards the end it gets quite dark because they got to like introduce like a thrilling climax.
Yeah.
Where yes, Kitty has fallen down from the hill in some way. We assume motivated by the puka luring her up there. Because earlier in the film a puka knocks Darby down a well.
Yeah.
So we can assume because we see her chasing the horse up the hill that the same things happen to her. Up to Nachnashiga, which is a real place, but is not in in this film. They have this happening in is it Kerry?
Oh, is it?
They have it happening in they show the address of the manor house on a piece of paper at one point, and it's County Kerry, but I think Nachnashiga is actually in Cork. But again, they're not going to be. It's Disney.
They're close enough.
Yeah, which is why I was thinking about like, oh, this could be like, because if you've ever been through the Gap of Dunlow, it's one of those places it's in Kerry, and it's this sort of, it's a place that once you're there, you become very acutely aware of how these stories came about. When you're in that place, especially in modern times when I don't want to be like the grumpy old man about kids and their phones. But the last time I was there and going through it, I did have the experience of being like, I haven't had a signal on my phone for 20 minutes and we've been driving that whole time and there's nothing here. Like there's no cell towers, there's no cables, you don't see phone cables, you don't see any of that stuff. It's just, and you don't have a signal, you're sort of cut off from the world when you're there.
Yeah.
And you can almost imagine, you look around and it's all just hills and rocks and sheep and I guess farmland and stuff and wee streams and rivers. And it's very much like how I imagine the places these stories tend to take place in would be.
There's still a lot of places on the west coast of Ireland that are very, very like that you kind of think is almost a thing of the past, but it's amazing going to see them, and it's great for a holiday to unwind and just admire some place like that. It's still very much needed, and I hope it stays forever because
indeed, yeah. Thing is, I think the Gap of Dunlow will stay forever because when you're there, you realize the reason it's like there's nothing there is because you're like, you couldn't build anything here. No. It's all just really rocky hills.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, like it's extreme hills. Like, I mean, you see sheep standing on sheer surfaces, You're like, how is that sheep not falling down? Because sheep are dumb as rocks.
Yeah.
But they're doing fine up there, and you're like, I think that place will probably persist and is a place that if you're ever going, I would recommend anyone go to Kerry or Cork. They're beautiful, beautiful places. But if you can meander your way through the Gap of Dunlow on the way, do so. As long as your car is all right. It's in a lot of ways to think about it now. I'm trying not to make it seem sinister because it is lovely. But if your car broke down there, you might have a bit of, well, someone will probably eventually come by because it is still like they're real roads going through it. But it is very much just like there's no way you're getting a signal on your phone there.
No.
And there's not really houses. People don't live there really either.
No.
It's just this strange ethereal place to me almost. I don't know. I have this weird attachment to it.
Yeah.
Now when I think about when I think about the Gap of Dunlow and I think about fairies and leprechauns and stuff. Yeah, it's just, it's a magical place. Oh, Jesus.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so Darby O'Gill, they don't really address, do they talk about iron or anything like that in Darby? They don't really bring that kind of stuff up.
Not to my knowledge. There might be a throwaway line or something. I honestly can't remember, but
Yeah.
no, nothing's really brought up as far as that goes. I mean, again, he's dealing with, especially compared to the other two movies here, he's dealing with friendlier kind of creatures.
Yeah, he's dealing with leprechauns who in the mythology are almost like the ruling class of the fairy folk.
Yeah.
So they're like somehow more civilized maybe than other creatures like pukas and changelings.
But they can still party like fuck.
But they can, oh man, when they party, they get real hype.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that whole like fiddle playing scene where he tricks them all into getting really like mad for the hunt, and then they all run off to go hunting, and that's how he takes his opportunity to leave, to sneak out.
Riles them up, something shocking.
Yeah, he does. So they are somewhat easily manipulated, I think, in this context of this movie. Anyway,
that's you have to know what strings to pull, and I mean, he's as we said before, he's in his 70s, so he's obviously had a lot of dealings with Bran over the years, and he's kind of learnt his ways, and that's maybe it. Is just once you get to, like anyone, once you get to know someone, you know what strings to pull to annoy them or get certain reactions out of them. So.
All John has to do is bring up Ghosts of Mars by John Carpenter if he wants to pull my strings. He knows that very well.
Yep. Still have a busted up nose from the last time I brought it up.
Yeah, watch it. So, Darby O'Gill's main weapon, I guess, in defending himself is his smarts. Yep. Then it's his ability to know his knowledge of the fairy folk and how he can use that to outwit them more than it was in, say, the Hallow, where it was just they were monsters trying to get them.
Yeah. And
they had iron, and that was kind of it, I think, with them.
Yeah, no, and even, once this whole thing happens with Katie, I think would be remiss to leave out what I think is a real important scene where he basically makes his final wish, which is let it take me instead, and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And that bit's fine. You kind of see that coming, but the bit I'm talking about is when he goes into the death coach or whatever you call it, and Brian appears.
The Irish name for it it's the Kostya Badar, I think, or the Kostya Bor, I think is how they pronounce it.
Yeah.
Which I think it literally means death coach, but it is like a solid, real. Well, it's not real, but it's a genuine thing from Irish mythology. Yeah. Anyway, that's what happens. So it's real. Yeah, so it's real then. Yes, in the context of what's happening to us right now, it is definitely real, and we're terrified of it.
But the great thing is, Brian, again, showing respect to each other. Brian appears in this coach with him and is going, "Oh, I'd love to go the whole way with you," and all this, and kind of saying, "Oh, it's a shame you won't see Katie married," and blah blah blah. And Darby has this brilliant wee speech of not even speech; they're just talking with each other. But this wee moment where he says, "It's better for the old to die than the young. In the end, we all have to go," and it's just this nice wee exchange between these two friends.
It's like really two really old friends who are just like, well, this is it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I've had a good run, essentially.
Yeah.
Is the sort of thing with that, I feel like. And you can that's a real great character moment between the two of them, because you get to feel like Brian really likes Darby a lot. He really does. He's really, really, really likes him.
Yeah. Which is kind of why he then tricks him again, because Darby's in a vulnerable kind of stage, like he's dying essentially. He's on this death coach, and that's when Brian says,
"Oh, it's a pity I can't go all the way with you. I'll have to get off here soon. Oh, I wish I could go all the way."
And then Darby, of course, as you just do, "Yeah, I wish you could too." And then Brian starts laughing.
"And you an educated man."
I say, it was just, "and you an educated man." It's so cheeky.
Yeah. So, but again, it's just done in such a way that it's quite heartwarming to know.
Yeah, he uses the thing he did earlier by tricking him into making a fourth wish. Yeah. He used that earlier in the movie to mess with him, and at this point, he uses exactly the same trick to save him,
and again,
to help him out, and it's quite nice.
Just to liken it to the Hallow, the Hallow's cordyceps thing, where it was very obvious that this was foreshadowing when it happened, and the foreshadowing it's not obvious because it happens within this story, and it's him telling the story of how King Brian kind of tricked him.
Yeah, got one over on him.
So you don't really see it coming up until you see wee Brian's face when he goes, "Oh,
it's a pity I can't go with you."
Yeah, he's like, he's being theatrically empathetic. He's like,
"Oh, it's such a pity I can't go with you."
You're like, oh my god.
But yeah, I have a lot of time for this movie. It's again, it's probably one that I haven't seen in maybe over 20 years, and I kind of was going at it thinking, "Oh, I bet you I'll come to this," as I tend to think, and when I come to movies that I maybe haven't watched in 20 years or longer, this is going to be rough, isn't it? This is going to be pretty bad. And no, I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it. I was just sitting there going, the problems that it has, I can overlook because of the time period it was made, or just that it's not that important. Like what you're saying, of they're getting the locations wrong and stuff. You kind of like go,
it's like, who cares?
Yeah, whatever. But I did find out though, and I do think this is kind of messed up, but this is more on the marketing side of things. Anyone who played a little person in it wasn't credited at all.
So like the leprechauns in the background, all those dancing
King
around
Brian,
guys? Yeah.
At the very start of this movie, it comes up a thank you for King Brian for participating and allowing his people to be in the movie, because Walt Disney, the maniac, had this whole idea of like they were trying to play this off as real, as the little people are real, and they helped. And apparently in Disneyland they even had like a movie set up or something of him like talking to King Brian and things like this using the Force perspective. And it's just, I think that's kind of messed up because they did a very good job, and they probably won't get
credited because of this weird marketing spin they were trying to put on it. Oh.
It's like, no, the little people are. It's like,
oh man, I kind of respect that kind of commitment to your art. I suppose it's a little bit reminiscent of whenever the Blair Witch Project was coming out, and they tried to make out like it was just genuine videotape that had been found in the woods. But I don't know. That's not cool. Actually,
no,
that's not cool. But I feel like an aspect of it, I respect an aspect of it. But it's still not okay.
No.
Right, well, they've brought out a big slab now, and they're all just sort of pointing at it and dancing around it, and one of them's got a measuring tape up and measured John's height for some reason, and them really getting antsy now, so we need to get I think we've probably got about... Well, we got to get out of here before sunrise anyway, so we need to move on now and figure out exactly what we're going to do. So let's now talk about Lee Cronin's The Hole in the Ground, which is a 2019 movie, and is very much set in a modern context. So, John, what did you think of The Hole in the Ground?
I thought it kind of dragged on a bit, especially the start. But it was okay. Again, very much like the Hallow. Once it kind of got on the rails, but once it got properly going, it was all right. But I felt it relied too heavily on kind of these close-ups of people not really doing anything, or there was a lot of like superfluous scenes which I kind of felt were a bit well, was superfluous. They were a bit pointless. There was because in this whole thing, it's changelings again, very specifically, that we're dealing with. It's this woman who thinks her kid has been swapped for a changeling, and it kind of, at one point, it kind of seems like it's going to go that route of making it a bit more psychological of, is it all in her head, or is this actually real? Is this happening? It kind of ditches that about maybe halfway through. But
yeah, it disposes of the question of whether or not that's happening in a way where you're like, oh no, that it's not in her head, and it is totally just we're actually dealing with a changeling here. Yeah.
Because there's a very long scene where she kind of watches him sleep, and like she's kind of going over and like kissing him on the forehead, doing that whole thing. But this is after the swap, and then it happens again. And I thought, did they fuck up the editing? Was this meant to happen before, when you knew for certain that it was her kid, Chris, isn't it?
I believe his name is Chris. Yes.
Yeah. But like, that's not to say, like, it does a lot of things well as well. Like I thought, whenever you know for certain that Chris is a normal boy, like, so before there's even a question of him being a changeling, he's sitting playing with toys when he should be eating. He's shit scared of spiders, which I can kind of relate to. And he's not, for the most part. Again, I have a problem with children actors. I mean, no, but they do it kind of well, where it's believable. He's like not really being bullied in school, but he's a bit of a loner, and he's having problems that way, and he's scared to make new friends and things, and that's fairly well done. But I just found there was like the scenes were almost dragged out a bit too long, and that goes from pretty much every scene, was just that like extra wee bit too long. It's like, yeah, I get it, and it's a shame, because the atmosphere is fine in it. Like they do a good job of creating that, and it kind of almost destroyed it for me that these scenes went on too long, because then I'm kind of going, yeah, I get it. On to the next thing, or what do you want to show me here? There's nothing left here. You're just literally extending the runtime, or you're keeping a shot on her face, which maybe isn't reacting to something, or it's like a shocked face, but nothing changed. Like that extra 20 seconds wasn't really needed.
Well, I think a lot of the stuff seems to be that they try to establish like a normal home life. So they do have a lot of scenes where people are just doing stuff, like she's just like, the kid's hanging out at the table mucking around, and she's standing washing dishes and stuff like that, and they have that go on for I think maybe like, yes, pacing is maybe
a bit too long for my liking. I mean, there could be, I'm not saying I sat and analysed every scene. I didn't. Maybe there's extra meaning. There is a lot of there's definitely a few Shining references. The wallpaper she puts up is definitely The Shining,
straight out of The Shining. Yeah.
I did, and I enjoyed parts of it, but there was kind of some moments of frustration, of just like, I just wanted it to be that kind of wee bit punchier or something. I wanted the pace to pick up, especially when we know what's going on, and you're kind of waiting for the characters to kind of catch up is always frustrating for me.
Yeah, it's there's probably a tighter, like 10-minute shorter version of this movie maybe, but I really like it. I think the thing I like about it is that it takes the changeling mythology and almost puts it in the context of, initially at least, of why it exists in the first place. Why people came up with the changeling to explain things. So like, I think a lot of mythology, mythology comes in like two flavors. Mythology comes in flavor 1 of
Peppermint.
here. Yes, the peppermint flavor of mythology, which is here is a story that we can tell to children or young people to stop them doing something we don't want them to do.
Yeah.
So you have Ginny Greenteeth that haunts the rivers. You know, Ginny Greenteeth will snatch children off riverbanks and eat them, which stops kids going down to the river when mummy and daddy aren't around and falling in and drowning. Yeah. And then there's the second flavor of mythology, which is we need to explain something that we don't understand. So we invented a monster or some kind of often like something, oh well, God did this because I guess in the face of the changeling, it's like you have something like, say, postpartum depression or something like that, where someone will have a baby and we know now that there is such a thing as postpartum depression, and someone can become depressed, and
there's also a syndrome called Capgras.
Capgras syndrome, yes. It's where you become convinced that people around you have been replaced with copies and they're not the real people. So that's very much what this and I mean that's what I was saying earlier. Like it kind of begins kind of going down that route, and you have this kind of, they almost hit this old woman with a car who's walking about muttering something along the lines of it's not really him or something. He's not your boy, I believe, is what she says to her. Yeah.
Like they almost knock her down, and that's very much, you get kind of the exposition for what happened with her at this dinner party later. And that's essentially who Sarah's going to start kind of mimicking almost.
Yeah, she's going to turn into this crazy gibbering old woman that like murdered her child.
Yeah.
And went crazy and killed her kid. And so the whole thing is that like this has happened to her, I guess.
Yeah.
In the context of she starts to believe that, well, if this happened to this woman, then it could also be happening to me.
Yeah.
Because like the kid does start acting differently and stuff, and you can explain.
I mean, at the beginning, or kind of at the early stages, and they make a point of saying that like he's changing in ways that only a mother can tell, which is good, because like everyone else is like, there's nothing wrong with him, like he's just, this is what happens, like, there's even her friend says something like, oh yeah, like what 1 minute they're angels and the next they're demons, and then they're back. She's like saying, no, that's just the way kids are. Kids are hard to kind of pin down. But then she starts like noticing he's eating spiders, and he's kind of getting all kind of twisted up, and like his limbs are moving weird, like when she's watching through the door. Yeah,
the bit where she's looking underneath the door at him capering about in his room because she thinks he's being weird. And like, so he like eats a spider, and he's crawling around on all fours, being mad, and like, that just exacerbates it. Now, there's a lot of stuff they do there where you're left to wonder at that stage of the movie, is he really doing all that stuff, or is she just delusional? Is this just how she's observing it? And that they do keep that going for a wee while, of where you're like, well, people sometimes think that way about, people who are in like some kind of spiraling depression or something will think that about.
They do plant the
people.
seed whenever she's whenever Mrs. Brady, that's what you call the old woman. When Mrs. Brady goes to their car and is like saying, "Oh, it's not your boy, it's not your son," or whatever, and then that night she is murdered, and her head's buried under the ground, and the police around just kind of taking statements off them because they were one of the last people to kind of see her alive, and she's watching her son kind of pretend arm wrestle one of the officers, and it's done very well, where it just like suddenly just like snaps the guy's wrist.
It's a little grotesque. It really comes out of nowhere as well. Like it was shocking.
Yeah, But it's planting the seeds there then for, she's obviously imagined that bit entirely.
Yeah, because
this did not happen.
Because that is something that definitely did not happen, and she just saw it happen in her head because she's so stressed out, and she's on the raggedy edge in a lot of ways. Like she's like, there's a whole thing with like one of the first things the kid says to her is like, "Why didn't Daddy move here with us?"
Yeah,
and you're like, "Oh," and it's like, "You said he'd be right behind us. That was a lie." Like, okay, things are not all well, like, because they act like a wee happy, like they're happy together, and they are, but you can tell that there's something else going on in the background, family wise, with it not, things aren't working out very well. Yeah,
she's got the scar on her forehead, which obviously there was some domestic violence there. It is very heavily hinted at.
Yeah, they never confirm that, but there's a scene where a doctor asks her about it.
Yeah.
And basically asks her if it's connected to the husband not being around anymore, and she doesn't really answer. Yeah. Yeah, but we can assume.
But it was one of those things where, like, when I was watching that scene where he's eating the spider and he's his limbs are kind of acting a bit weird, like
contorting unnaturally.
Yeah, it's contorting. Well, it's not like really out there, but it is kind of like, oh, what's happening? But the whole time I was thinking, if this is, because I think this is where I decided that it's definitely happening, because everything was taking so long to unfold, and it was like really laboring over the point that I said, if this is in her head, I am going to be fucking annoyed that they spent a good half an hour with her looking through this door.
Because there was no, then there'd be no point to it.
Yeah, if there's no payoff to this, I'm going to be raging. But no, they fairly quickly after this kind of completely give up on that. I think definitely to the point where, like, he pushes the table into her when she starts challenging his whereabouts the night before. I think that's definitely like there's something.
Because it's a big, heavy wooden table.
Yeah.
And she's confronting him like, were you out in the woods? And he's like, no. And then she's like, she asks him where his toy. She finds a toy of his out in the woods near the titular hole in the ground, which seems to be, it's a sinkhole that's about maybe like 100 or so meters behind their house. That is, and it's a big old, it's a big massive. Like, the hole itself is small enough, but the crater of stuff that has fallen sort of towards it is pretty goddamn wide. Yeah, and like she's been like, don't go out there, don't go near that, and she's told him off, and then she finds one of his toys out there, and then so she challenges him, and like, well, how did this get out there then if you weren't? And that's where like he/it loses its temper and like shoves this and like slaps the edge of the table, and this huge wooden table flies like across the kitchen and pins her against the counter.
Oak table, like it's not a wee IKEA. IKEA table.
A kid that size might be able to move it, but not like that.
No.
So that is the point where you go, oh, maybe this is really happening then. This probably is actually a monster. But again, everybody is looking at her and thinking, no, this isn't right. Your kid didn't change into a monster in the night times. He wasn't snatched away and replaced.
They don't really play up on that either. Like they don't really show. There's a bit in the school where I found that bit very, very cheesy, and I didn't like when he's up singing his wee part of the song, and then it goes into creepy voice, and
it almost seems like they've entered a dream sequence.
Yeah, and
but they haven't.
It's maybe just a personal thing, but I started laughing at that bit.
But do you think that implies maybe magic, or what? Because I mean,
to me, it seemed more like a artistic director's choice of this is what she's kind of hearing. I mean, at this point, maybe there are some people watching like still thinking, oh no, it's all in her head and there's nothing wrong with the kid. But to me, I was just kind of like sitting there going, this is hilarious. This is
Yeah,
like,
'cause it's like everybody else in the whole room. It's like a school play kind of thing. That's choir, and it's his whole class, and
Yeah.
they're singing this down in the valley, oh, the right do, the fit do. Yeah, that kind of song.
In the valley, oh.
Yeah, so like she's sitting watching them in the play, and then literally everybody in the whole room disappears except
Yeah.
for him and her. And he's standing on stage on his own with a spotlight on him, and he's just saying the words
Yeah.
to the song. And like, it is a song about like the tree and the hole in the ground and way
Yeah.
down in the valley. But he's just saying the words and staring her dead eyed in the face.
and if I remember correctly, they've added like a bit of a filter, so he sounds a bit deeper.
Yeah, they put on the spooky child filter.
Yeah, the spooky
Yeah.
child filter.
Yeah, that you see in a lot of films. So they try to make like a child who is possessed or been replaced like this seem way more sinister by like having almost two voices at once.
Yeah.
And the second voice is like pitched down 2 octaves to make it be like "Arr," like something like in they did that in The Exorcist, but they did it really effectively in The
Yeah.
Exorcist.
Oh,
Whereas
yeah.
here it doesn't come off quite as well. I don't think.
No, I like. So she basically runs away on him in the school.
Yeah, she gets up and runs out of the assembly hall in a panic in front of all the other parents. And you're like, okay, yeah,
But
she's
this is-
fucking lost it.
Yeah, this is like the only real stage where like people see her kind of in that kind of manic kind of way,
Yeah.
and no one comes round to the house to kind of say, is she all right? And should we leave the kid with her? Because like she just ran away on him here. Like
Yeah,
everyone
'cause
just
you would think, but yeah, because like literally she runs out and then they're all leaving, and her friend who works at the school is one of the teachers there, and then her kid's actual teacher are there, and she literally says in front of them, I think at that point, he's not my son.
yeah.
And you're like,
I don't know
that's
who
the
he is,
point.
but he's.
I mean, that's the point where you call Child Protective Services,
Yeah.
like, and you have them
Or
do a
if
home
it's your
visit.
friend, you go round and go like maybe see them first and go, "You all right? Were you taking some heavy acid maybe?"
Are you okay? Are you on something? Are you or just like, are you feeling okay? Because I'm
Yeah.
concerned about you because I know your husband recently has your potentially, we assume, violent husband
Yeah.
has like whether or not you're like, it's never really established if they're just getting divorced or whether she has run away from him
Yeah.
to here to live in this house in the woods. But either way, it's trauma, and maybe people should be a bit more. People do try to be cool with her and stuff, but yeah, they're a little bit disassociated. But
Yeah.
I think maybe they do that on purpose to make them maybe seem more isolated out in this house in the woods.
Yeah. I mean, like there are certain, again, artistic choices probably more so than anything to try and feed into that feeling and to give exactly what you're saying there of just make everything feel more isolated. And whether or not it works for you is, I suppose, a personal thing. For me, it raised too many questions for me, and I suppose I'm just sitting there going, "What? This is ridiculous! Like, who left the kid home and then just went right see it?"
Yeah, you're looking for the realistic world in which this movie takes place. Yeah. Whereas I think maybe I am more of the thought of, I think I just like this film because it does do the changeling thing justice in a way, in that it's like, it does, like, I think as I said before, it establishes the context for the reason for the changeling myth. It's like someone who thinks their child has been replaced because they're having a terrible time, someone who's stressed out new mother, like maybe someone who's, I mean, I think that the actual myth itself goes back to like someone having a baby and like maybe that baby's behavior changing at some point, and that's usually just like this baby is now yelling and crying all the time, which sometimes that just happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes a baby gets a couple of months old and then you don't know why. There's probably a reason the baby is crying, but you're not sure. You know, maybe this baby has a sore thumb. Maybe this baby has a tooth coming through, and I don't know. But a baby suddenly becomes extremely fussy and aggravating, and it's stressing you out way more. And you're like, oh, but he used to be such a good baby, and you know that's like, oh, no, you're at the point where, oh, well, this can't be my baby then, because my baby doesn't act like that. And then later on in life, you get like young kids, like this young boy who's maybe on the verge of growing up. You know, kids do go through changes, behavioral changes like that as well, where suddenly they become more introverted, or like, he's not his happy-go-lucky self anymore. And also, you know, like you have the added context in this of now his dad's not around.
Yeah. There's like a certain level of family strife here.
Yeah.
That he's dealing with.
Yeah, his day-to-day life has changed a lot.
Yeah.
And he maybe hasn't fully adapted to it because, I mean, he brings it up. Like you said, Dad will be coming here right behind us, and he hasn't, and it's been months now, and he's not here.
And that's actually the last thing the real Chris says to her.
Yeah.
More or less, because that's at that point he runs into the forest. So it is,
again,
like feeding into. I mean, conceptually, I do like this movie. I like the concept of this movie. I just don't like the pacing of it. I think again that's the major problem I seem to have with a lot of movies. Is I don't have a lot of time. Quicken things up.
It's a valid concern. Like if a story is teetering on not holding your interest, that is, you know, that's the opposite of telling a good story in a lot of ways.
And like, because on that, like the actress did well, I thought for the most part, but there was times where, and this was clearly intentional, it was a close-up shot of her kind of almost standing wide-eyed and gawping at something. Yeah. And it just lingers that bit too long of like, do something, or like, you know, she does do something eventually, but you're just like, for fuck's sake, like, don't stand for 20 seconds looking at it, just go. And I think I'm not sure, but I think even when she finds her real son, when she goes into the sinkhole, there's like a kind of like, you know, gawpy. It's like
she does a lot of looking around in shock when you know, you're like, just grab the kid and get the fuck out, mate.
Yeah, like
just grab the kid and go. But then, you know, that scene does end with, like, you know, they are being chased by another creature. This seems to be a place where they inhabit or they grow down in this hole.
Yeah.
The changelings, because there's another one down there that's sort of like a different one.
Yeah.
That tries to chase her out. Tries to stop her taking him out of the hole.
Yeah.
Which is like at one point I was watching that and thinking, oh, is that supposed to be the changeling? But then at that point she has caught the changeling, her son, back in the house. She's locked him in a room, and he's like been bashing at the door trying to get out, and he can't. And then they go back to the house after they get away from the thing that was under the ground. They go back to the house, and it's still in there, banging, trying to get out. And I was like, oh, right. And I was like, okay, I like this. And at that point in the movie, I was almost thinking, are they still going to go back and lean on the this was all in her head thing, though?
Yeah.
Because there's a point where she is standing, and like the way she deals with that then is to burn the house down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have heard stories, and you see it in a lot of horror movies where it's the backstory of the horror movie, where it's like, oh, she locked all her children in their rooms, and then set the house on fire, and she stood outside and watched it burn.
Yeah,
I was half expecting her to be outside holding, because the kid's in a big, I think she puts him in like a coat or something, and is standing with him over her shoulder, like with the kid over her shoulder, watching the house burn.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's burning in there. And I was still at that point almost half expecting it to be like, whatever's in this coat, maybe the coat's empty, or maybe there's like some kind of doll in the coat or something, and she's actually just burned her son alive. But no, because then, you know, they do kind of go, no, here's a little flash forward.
Yeah. Which again, like, I, just what you're saying there, I would have preferred an ending like that would have been maybe a bit better. But especially because just at that point what you're saying, where they get chased by the kind of bigger changeling that's under the ground, and it at one point grabs her, and then it looks like her.
Yes, it turns into her as it's grabbing on to him, trying to pull her back into the hole. Yeah,
and then
it's like metaphor. I was expecting that to be a metaphor for like, oh, you're the danger to your child, maybe.
Well, maybe it is, because it doesn't really, like, there's no payoff to this scene, because then literally, and I mean, she had a hell of a time dealing with the changeling Chris. Like, she had, she could not physically overpower that thing. It threw her about the kitchen whenever she challenged it, whenever it wouldn't play the face-pulling game with her, and then that's when she goes,
Yeah.
Oh, you're not my son, you're not my son.
and then it starts flinging her about.
Is literally throwing her
Yeah.
around. Yeah.
And only she kind of planned this, and she drugged his food earlier. She would have been killed, but this one she manages to get away from somehow. This is all off screen. She gets away, is in the woods, and it seemingly has given up chasing her, because you never see that one again. And it was just kind of like a bit of a right. What
It
was
was
that
this
for then?
moment of drama that once it's over, you feel like it was almost out of context.
Yeah, so that, like,
Yeah.
maybe it is what you're saying. It's a ham-fisted kind of, you were the monster all along.
Yeah, it's I feel like, as I'm always looking for metaphors and
Yeah.
everything. Sometimes even when they're not there. So that's why I was. the first thing-
that killed the beast.
No, it was me. Shut up, you. No, but yeah. So as soon as I saw that and it turns into her, I was like, that put me back into the thought of, oh, maybe this is all in her head, and that's like a metaphor for like it's you that's the problem.
Yeah.
You're dangerous to your child. This is all on you. But then they have the scene where she then burns the house down with the changeling inside, and then it flashes forward to them however many months, 3 months later or something like that, and they're living in a flat, I assume in Dublin. I think maybe it is.
Probably.
It looks like it maybe is, and he's
Or
playing
maybe
around
Cork.
and-
She's
Yeah,
somewhere
could be.
with a big enough university, because she's back.
Aye.
She's back.
She's back studying. Yes, she's back studying at university again. And they have that scene
Because
where
they're the only two places in Ireland that have universities.
I mean, there are other universities, but the only
just
ones
realised
know
when
of-
I said
yeah,
that, I was like-
that was yeah. I went along with it too. I'm just as guilty, John. I said, "Oh yeah, you know, like how there's only
everywhere
there's only
else in
Trinity
Ireland,
College. There's Trinity College in Dublin, and then there's a university in Cork, and that's it."
Everywhere else, they're worshipping fairies and they're
Yep.
sacrificing goats.
Well, that TD we were talking about earlier, he teaches at the hedge school down the road. Yeah, so they do that thing at the end that I guess I don't know if I like it in films. I like things to be open ended, but I don't like things to be like on the nose open ended. If you know what I mean. Or, like,
Sometimes
she's-
it can work. Actually to bring back the earlier movie of the Hallow, I thought whenever they swapped the babies round, there was going to be oh, did she get the right one? Did she not? Kind of thing. And I actually thought in that it would have been weaker to go for that, because it didn't feel earned. It didn't feel like. I don't think they would have pulled it off too well or something.
They made the right decision for the film they were making.
Yeah, and it actually
Yeah.
made me. I was sitting there watching it, and like you watch the changeling baby melt in the sunlight, and it's kind of like going, "What would I have done? Like, would it have been better to kind of have the question mark, and like, how would you go about it?" But I think it was probably the best choice for them,
Yeah.
even though that movie's not very good. But in this, they probably would have been better going for a more ambiguous ending. And again, just what you're saying, it's a lot more difficult to do it right. Sorry, you don't want it being you don't want it being too
Yeah.
obvious or too. I'm struggling to find the word here. But
Yeah, but I feel like in this film they almost do try to have their cake and eat it too with this movie, because
yeah,
there is a part where at the end when she's looking down on him, like riding around on his bike,
yeah,
and she's taking photographs of him.
yeah,
Now she has mirrors all over their flat,
yeah.
because earlier in the movie she looks in the mirror and she sees him sort of as he really is, and that's one of those like, oh, he is a monster look.
Yeah.
So we're assuming that there's this wall of mirrors in the flat that they've moved into, and you assume like, well, obviously if he was a changeling, she'd see in those mirrors.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, but she's taking pictures of him riding around on his bike, like she's looking down from the apartment as he's driving around, and like they have this bit where she looks back through the photos and looks at his face in the photo,
Yeah.
and it's a bit blurred.
Yeah. That's.
But and they hold on that for a moment that makes me think, like, are we supposed to think that maybe that might hint that he's not him, but they don't
Yeah,
establish
it's-
cameras having that effect
No.
throughout any other point in the film.
It felt like
It feels
maybe
tacked on.
maybe the relevant scenes had been deleted or cut in when they're editing. Because I had the same feeling. It was like, I'm what? Like,
And what? So, yeah, I mean, he was riding around in a circle on his bike, so some of those pictures are going to be blurry. Like,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me.
Every blurry picture of a child means they're a changeling. Yeah, I felt overall. I mean, again, it's maybe part and parcel of the problem when you're writing a narrative that can kind of have two meanings, or is this all in her head, or is this actually happening? Is this a supernatural movie, or is this a psychological movie? Is that a lot of the protagonists' reactions are almost to serve the story, like they don't feel natural. They don't feel like, even her, she runs to that hole and she's like sinking in it, and you're like going, what is the plan here? Like what is the actual plan? But again, I suppose anyone defending the movie can say, well, she, if you do go that psychological route, she is going a wee bit sideways. She's going a wee bit crazy.
She's going doolally, living on her
Doolally.
own out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And she has that
Sorry,
disturbing
I didn't know
encounter.
the medical terms there.
Yes. Well, you wouldn't, would you? No.
No,
Yes,
no,
she officially goes. In fact, at some point they do throw out some fun terms in this. Maybe when they're talking about the old woman that did previously kill her child, or what we can fairly safely assume from the context of the movie probably was a changeling.
Yeah.
They use the term they sent her away to get her head fixed. And I was like, oh, there's another one of those like Irish-isms.
Yeah.
That's speaks of a different time maybe, but this is in a modern context. This is like a movie that came out in 2019.
Oh,
like,
I
they
could see
sent her
family
off.
members of mine saying that too. And like meaning well when they say it, but completely just you're sitting there cringing, going, people don't say that anymore.
Yeah, you don't send them away. You don't put them away in the loony bin to get their head fixed. That's not cool. Like, yeah, but
I do think it. If it is if the intention was that, and it does seem like it was, to have that duality of supernatural or psychological, I think it does shit the bed towards the end.
To use another term.
To use a parlance.
Yeah.
Because by the time she's crawling around in that hole, I think you're more or less set on just, again, it can always be argued that it's in someone's head, but there's a lot of superfluous scenes that are just, well, if it is, then why even show that? Like, it doesn't make much sense to me. And just again, what you're saying of having the changeling Chris still in the house, and having a new one in that underground thing, but it's one of those ones that's difficult. Like, I can understand people enjoying this movie and getting more out of it. For me, it just didn't hit. It just didn't resonate with me.
Oh, well, I quite liked it. I quite liked that they did do sort of putting folklore in a modern context. I enjoyed that, and actually like committing to it being folklore, even though like it would still be fun to have it be like a metaphorical thing.
Yeah.
And her kind of, but the fact that they do lean into it and go, no, this is really happening to this poor woman, and nobody believes her, because why would you? Like, maybe 150, 200 years ago, people would have taken her more seriously.
Or
And
probably
maybe
not, because she's a single woman. And
they wouldn't have. They would have just called her a witch and threw her in the river. Actually,
that was kind of that's what they did back then.
Yeah,
So,
you're right. Yeah, so she doesn't really. Does she learn much in the way of how to deal with the changeling? Really?
No. Well, burns down the house. Well, you don't actually see if that sorted it out or not, I suppose.
Yeah,
I mean,
she
I'm
burns down the
assuming-
house and just leaves, and then that's that, and then she's no longer anywhere near the woods.
Yeah.
So that's that problem sorted.
I'm assuming that she was able to deal with the bigger one in the underground tunnels. I actually thought at that point they were going to do like the, what do you call that? Is it the Alien Covenant, where the androids? Oh, sorry for the spoiler here. Don't watch that movie.
It's not great. Like
the androids like switch near the end,
Yeah,
because
it's such an obvious twist.
Yeah,
as well.
it's really, which is why I didn't even feel like I kind of launched into it before I said spoiler, because it is the most obvious twist.
Yeah,
in cinema. Well, maybe not.
It's like, oh, Michael Fassbender's in this movie twice.
Yeah.
And one of them's good and one of them's evil. Gee, I wonder if we're going to get them mixed up at some point. Well.
There, I shouldn't go into it, but there's even an annoying bit in it where the evil one like makes the same scar that he just gave to the good one, but no one's seen them fighting, so he had no need. So it's for the audience that he does it. But anyway, I thought they were going to do the same thing with her when she's seen the changeling that looked like her. That was going to be because I kind of knew at the end there was going to be some kind of, oh, is it the real thing or blah blah blah. But I thought it was going to lean more into that way of like, is she the real Sarah or is she a changeling?
Like, could there be like, the reason it turned into her in the hole, that it's now just going to replace her?
Yeah, and that's how they got out so easily.
Yeah,
but it didn't go that direction at all. So
no.
Yeah.
But overall, I think I really enjoyed this film. I did. I like this film quite a bit.
Okay.
It's not doing anything particularly new or anything like that. But I think there were a lot of things I liked about it.
Yeah.
And I also discovered while I was watching it that the director of this movie is making the next Evil Dead movie.
Oh.
Which is a weird thing.
Yeah.
That might be cool.
Is like Evil Dead 2 but for these new rebooted versions?
I think it's a proper sequel.
Okay.
It's called Evil Dead Rise is the name of it.
Okay.
Whether or not it's a sequel to that Evil Dead reboot that happened that was not awful but was not an Evil Dead movie.
No. It didn't have Bruce Campbell hamming it up in the best possible way.
I mean, there's no cast or anything announced for it, so whether Bruce Campbell's in it or not, I don't know.
But I would say
using
probably
the word Deadites.
Oh.
They use the word Deadites in the description of the movie, so I'm hoping it's going to be in the Sam Raimi continuity.
I would love to see Bruce Campbell in it. Maybe this is the movie to follow up from the Ash vs. Evil Dead series.
That would be great.
That would be awesome.
But anyway, we've gotten wildly off track here. So I think we need to move on and just decide what we're going to do about the leprechauns.
Yep.
All right. Well, it's definitely near time we should be getting out of here. The fiddle playing has started and they're sharpening their knives. So two things we need to establish now. First of all, regardless of the urgency of our situation, John, what do you think was the best film of the three films that we just watched?
Yeah, this one's kind of easy for me because the one I had the most fun with was definitely Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Yeah, I felt that one coming, to be honest. Yeah, I could get that.
The Hallow was just didn't hit the mark, as we said. It didn't even really feel that the setting was necessary. It just felt like a generic monster movie.
Yeah. It felt like somebody played, again, like you were saying, someone played The Last of Us.
Yeah.
And then wanted to write a monster movie.
They got Cordyceps idea.
The idea of like fungus that can get into your like brain or whatever and control you.
And at the same time, they were, I don't know, maybe they were watching Darby O'Gill and the Little People, the one to blend the two.
Yeah, they wanted to find a way to combine their interests into one terrible whole.
It's the only two things they like were Darby O'Gill and the Little People and The Last of Us.
Yeah, which is probably going to be a series. It's being a TV series soon as well, The Last of Us, which who knows how bad that's going to be. Maybe it'll be great. I don't know.
I like that. Who knows how bad that's going to be.
Yeah, it's a video game adaptation, you know.
Well, we'll see. We'll see maybe. If it ever actually gets made.
Right.
But then, yes, the hole in the ground. I was about to call it a hole in the ground. Just for me, it just didn't quite hit the mark. It was, all the things that I said. It was just more a personal thing on my side, maybe, or maybe it was just the time I was watching it. You can get that sometimes where you're just like, I'm not in the mood.
Yeah. I think I really liked like that. As you say, I completely agree with you about the Hallow.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is very much like this is sort of almost a generic monster movie in a way.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't need to be in the wilds of Ireland and doesn't need to be in like relation to Irish mythology, really, because of the way they've couched it all in this fungoid thing. And yeah, so I'm gonna dismiss that out of hand. I enjoyed it as a monster movie in the woods.
Yeah. And it has some great shots, as we mentioned before, like the part that you were talking about with the car and the lights kind of coming on.
Yeah.
I mean that was done really well, and the bar the stinger music, as I mentioned, but the first shot of the monster really from that camera was pretty good, but. Just overall, it just kind of didn't really hit the mark beyond that, beyond a few scenes.
Yeah, it's that whole like, oh, something in the background is happening and that's really cool, but yeah, the parts where there's like jump scares and and you just feel like, well, this could have been made in Hollywood.
Yeah.
For like Netflix to be like a Oogie Boogie jumping out of cupboards, make a loud noise movie.
That's probably the best way to put it. It feels like one of those kind of rushed out. Not to say there's not good movies on Netflix, but like one of those dime a dozen Netflix movies that are just kind of pumped out and just like, yep, there we go.
Yeah. It's like, well, Netflix wanted a horror movie, so they could say they had this many horror movies, so here you go. And like, I think it is, as you say, it's decently well made. It is well framed.
Yeah.
And like the locations again, it's really nice locations.
Yeah.
It was weirdly shot. I think it was shot in Wicklow and Canada. Weirdly. I'm assuming they just did like pick up shots for like just shots of the forest and stuff, maybe in forests in Canada, in places that look similar. I don't know, but like they found some nice places to film it. Maybe it was Sligo actually. I think maybe I just.
I think I remember seeing Wicklow somewhere in relation
maybe
to
it was. But most of it, I think all the stuff with actors and stuff, and maybe the cottage and all that stuff was filmed in the Republic of Ireland, and it has that board Scanlan the Heron on it and all that. So yeah. But part of it was shot in Canada. But they found some really nice locations. They found some locations that look like, oh, this looks like somewhere where creepy Irish monsters would hang out and stuff. But the way they portray the creature and stuff maybe isn't quite as steeped in the mythology as I personally would like.
There wasn't a fiddle among them.
No one was fiddling. No one was singing songs or dancing jigs or trying to trick someone by being wily. If there's one thing I'll say for the changelings are trying to trick people.
Yes.
That's the whole thing. There was no changeling trying to trick people in this film. They were just trying to steal a baby.
Yeah.
They're trying to take the baby, and then the changing was happening to the husband more than anything.
Yeah.
In the movie, rather than anything like someone being deceived into thinking other people were otherworldly creatures.
It was the only one that brought up the iron, which is a thing,
That's true.
But kind of almost shot itself in the foot with that because it was going this more scientific route.
Yeah.
That's just kind of left unexplained then. So
I know.
Yeah, it definitely has its issues. It's one of those ones, it's maybe all right to stick on. Once
you can sit and watch it and you'll have a good time. You say that was all right, but you're not necessarily going to go like in 3 or 4 years' time. You're gonna be like, oh, brilliant! The Hollow's on tonight. We're going to sit down and watch that. Whereas I think The Hole in the Ground. This is actually the second time I watched A Hole in the Ground, and I was happy to do it because I did like it the first time I saw it, and this time I knew stuff that was going to be coming, and I think that's maybe why I was looking at it in more of a critical eye with the metaphors and looking for metaphors, maybe. Where maybe there weren't some, or maybe there were, which again I like the fact that I'm not sure.
Yeah,
is actually something I like about it.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. There's more. There definitely is more to grasp onto with the hole in the ground as compared to the Hallow. Again, just didn't quite hit the mark for me. But I can understand people enjoying it. It's
simple people like me.
Simple people.
You can understand a simpleton like me. Getting something out of it.
Maybe I'm the simpleton because I'm not getting all the deep meanings. I'm too dumb.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's too cruel to yourself there, John.
What's all these metaphors?
What's that mean?
Yeah, using your big words.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to trick you. I'm trying to trick you like a little folk. That's what I'm trying to do. No, but I like so I like the fact that it did take the mythology and use it in a modern context, and they bled it into like a lot of the stuff we know now. That again, I've been over this point several times with this movie, but the whole thing about like psychological conditions and dissociative disorders and things like that were probably the root of the myth in the first place.
Yeah,
I like that. I like the setting again. I think it does very well. They shot it in a really beautiful location.
Yeah,
in dark woods that are sinister. They do a lot of actually. One thing I noticed about this movie, there's a lot of, weirdly enough, you were talking about The Shining before, and they do a lot of aerial shots.
Yes,
like the start of The Shining in this film.
Yeah, and I think it even follows her car, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Literally, that's the first thing in the shot in the movie.
Yeah,
I think is them drive their car above, and it's very much like that shot from the beginning of The Shining of them driving to the Overlook Hotel, and it revisits that a few times over the course of the film, where you see the car from above like that, and it's moving like the what would have been probably a helicopter shot maybe in The Shining.
Yeah, definitely.
Which now they probably used a drone for this. I don't know, but it echoes it very much, and I like that. I like it when you see just when the movie's not ripping off another movie, but they just do one wee thing.
Yeah.
That isn't like in your face, but maybe you notice and you go, "Oh, that's kind of like The Shining, and that's kind of cool." And then they get over it.
Yeah,
you know,
and
they're not
I think
ripping
even
off The Shining.
Like we've said before in previous episodes, it can be sometimes a bit difficult to say if it's a homage or a rip-off, and it's definitely a homage in this case. You know, it's different enough, and also they almost kind of give you another wee like taste of like the homage whenever the style of wallpaper that she's putting up is a different color, but very, very, very similar to the Shining design.
Yeah, and it is about a child. There's some sinister child-related stuff. It's very, very different than The Shining, because in The Shining, the child is not the antagonist. The child is the victim of his father, or is it sort of flipped in this way, like where the child is the one doing the bad things in the hole in the ground?
Yeah.
Whereas, the parent. Although they do hint, I also think that in The Shining they hint at the violent father as well.
Oh yeah.
In The Shining, you know, he has the thing where it's like there's a whole thing where he's talking to the ghost who runs the bar in The Shining about accidentally breaking Danny's arm when he was angry, and in this they have the abusive, like, now they don't really say that the father was abusive towards the child though. That they was definitely a violent man, so it echoes it there. But again, as you say, it's not a rip-off. It's like you get the impression that the guy who directed this movie was maybe just a big fan of Stanley Kubrick and just wanted to just put in a couple of wee things as just a wee nod to something that he liked, or maybe someone who's influenced him. And I think they're done subtle enough that it's not intrusive.
Yeah,
you know, you just kind of notice it and you move on. You don't go, oh god, they're just doing this, because it's not. There's no
shot for shot remake of The Shining, only with changelings.
But somehow about a changeling. No, so they don't do that. So but again, I think I'm probably also going to settle on old Darby O'Gill, because I don't know if it's our
it could
connection to
be
it.
nostalgia and yeah. I mean, we've grown up with this from a very, very early age. You know, we were probably watching this when we were, you know, single-digit children.
4 and up, like, I'd say. I don't know how many times I've seen Darby O'Gill and the Little People, but the number is high. You know, I mean, I think we watched it. There was a point where you and I probably watched it as teenagers, laughing all the way through. I mean, that definitely happened. I'm not going to say probably. We definitely did that when we were younger, the two of us together, with probably a few other people around, thinking, haha, isn't this great? And then maybe didn't watch it for years until, like, now. Yeah. But whenever I was a wee kid, I saw this film a lot. Yeah. And it's got in there.
Oh, yeah. There's scenes in there that, as they were playing out, I probably could have got a good 70% of the lines. I could have repeated them.
Yeah, I mean, I just sometimes just start singing that song. There's that song that Sean Connery, that, oh, for she's my dear, my darling one, her sparkling eyes are full of fun. Like, I've been singing that song for 30 years. Easily.
Yeah, it's right in there with all the songs from Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, exactly.
It's in
yes.
that library
you're exactly
of songs
right.
in your brain that pop in every now and then. And you go, oh my god.
Yeah. If you want to do a callback, yes, to something I said, yes, it's a theme with me, with music and film, songs in films, where there's a few films that I've seen 1 billion times, and I'll just have like I will have, you know, feed me. That will come into my head sometimes because it was in Little Shop of Horrors and it's burned in there. Like this, my lovely Irish girl, the song in this is just like, I'll just be standing in the kitchen sometimes and just sing it. I'll just hear myself going, oh, and then I know what's coming, and then I don't stop it, and it just happens. So that's me.
But it's just a very feel good movie without being too like saccharine or too kind of over the top with it. Like it you know.
It doesn't have quite a fairy tale ending.
No,
you know, they're not suddenly rich and living in the castle. By the end of the movie, it's like, well, things are sort of like they were at the beginning.
Yeah, it's
almost, except these two people are now sort of in love, I guess.
And they're kind of secondary. Well, not kind of. They're secondary characters. It's kind of It is very much about Darby O'Gill and King Brian. They are your main characters in this, and he ends up kind of just the same.
They're back at square one in a lot of ways.
They're happy there. They're like, all Darby wants to do is go to the bar and tell us stories, and everyone's happy enough with that. And the one thing we did forget to mention was that because I just want, like, this is no bearing on anything, but I just love this line is when they're trying to pull the wool over Katie's eyes. Darby says to Michael, the new guy taking over his job, that, you know, don't tell her yet and all this. And at one point she's questioning him, like, why is this fella Michael starting? And it's like, oh, he thinks I just need a hand, and me doing the work of 10 men. I just love that line from him.
Yeah, it's such a typical, like, just cheeky Irish bastard thing to say. You're like, this guy's doing fuck all. This guy's sleeping half a day.
It says so much about his character. You know, it's always this, you know, this high opinion of himself kind of thing. But he's so lovable. But it's a joy to watch that movie. I hope everyone else gets the joy that I get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, we just have this sort of, it could be nostalgia tugging at us, but yeah, I mean, I have a lot of good memories of this movie and bad. I mean, I was terrified of the Banshee when I was a kid. That thing scared the bejesus out of me. And yeah, you look at it now and you're like, that's an effect. It's still kind of creepy though. When she's just standing there and crying, you're like, oh, that is actually a little bit unnerving. But like as a kid, that scared the absolute shite out of me. Like, so that's, although that was probably at the same time that I was, you know, like scared of gremlins still and stuff like that. So I'm gonna forgive myself.
Yeah, I was scared of my shadow as a kid, so I can't say anything.
Yeah, being afraid of the dark is, you know, I was when I was a kid. That was me, and like. All the Banshee stuff happens in the nighttime in the dark, and it's raining and it's scary and there's lightning and all that kind of stuff, and they actually put that together quite well. Whenever it sort of flies towards the screen, it does look really goofy now, but back then, I probably wasn't even looking at the screen at that point. I was like, nope.
It's also the sound design as well for it. The reverb adds a lot to it.
Oh yeah, because she has got all these like this echo, like she's in this big scary space, and it's almost it's the ghost filter. They put the ghost filter on that, much like they put the scary child filter on the kid in the hole in the ground. They put the Hollywood ghost filter on her, so she sounds like she's in a cave the whole time. So yeah, I think we settled on Darby O'Gill now. Which of these films then is best to educate us about defeating and or escaping the fair folk of the Emerald Isle?
That's it's a loaded question, isn't it?
Because
the hole in the ground doesn't really give us any information because it cuts away at the moment she's getting away from her doppelganger.
Aye.
And then, other than setting your house on fire, that's all you can really take from that.
Yeah.
Set your house on fire and move city.
Yeah, there's not a lot of good advice for defeating. The Hallow does sort of it lets you know, like, okay, the light hurts these things and iron keeps them away.
Yeah, it gives you a wee bit more
it's a bit of an education, and they try and get scientific with it, which again, I think at this point we maybe feel is maybe a failing in the film, perhaps.
It's like a double-edged sword. It's not. It works for part of it, but then your logic breaks down on the other side of things.
Yeah.
Again, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, and it doesn't work. You kind of have to lean in, which again, we've said this too many times at this point, but which is why it doesn't make sense for it to be kind of coated with this Irish mythology veneer. Like, it doesn't work for it.
No. And Darby O'Gill again. Darby O'Gill uses his smarts and his wiliness to get out of trouble mostly.
Yeah.
And his cat at one point.
And he succeeds for the most part.
He does.
I mean, he definitely escapes, and then he gets the upper hand on King Brian.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, he's a winner at the end of the day, I think. Yeah. So I think Darby O'Gill's method of either outwitting.
I mean, we both play instruments as well, so we already have a leg up here because that's exactly what you do. You just play a really ripping guitar line, and they'll dance. And
he plays like a badass like hunting song on his fiddle. Yeah, on a Stradivarius, no less, that they have down there, because they have all the expensive things in the underground kingdom. And I
used to know a few, like, jigs and things like that. I could probably probably get some of them up.
I don't know if I could. I don't know if leprechauns would be too into like listening to a bass solo, though. I don't know if I'm gonna be. I don't know if I'm gonna do all right there. Like,
you're only going to get those like real jazz connoisseur.
They'll be pleased, and the rest of them will just get annoyed. So I don't think it's gonna go well for me. But I'll stand behind you, and you play a jig, and I'll try and be clever. I guess. Is that
what a plan? I'll try and be clever.
I'll try and be clever, 'cause that's the best I've got.
I also have a cat as well. I have two cats. Yeah. So we can threaten.
Did you bring them here? Have you got them in your pockets?
No. That is a problem. Well, no, we lure him back to our house when we're going to get our pipes and our potching.
Indeed, we'll use the Darby method of getting them on our home turf.
Yeah. Just make sure we always have a plentiful supply of Buckfast or something.
Indeed. Do you think leprechauns like Buckfast?
I think King Brian would drink anything.
I think, he was drinking that potching that was probably 90% sheep dip.
Yeah.
So, well, we'll offer him some Bucky, and we'll get him hammered, and then we'll we'll use our smarts and our musical talent, and then we'll wish our way out of it.
Yeah. We just need to be clever with our wishes and never go for the fourth wish.
Indeed, yes, that is the most important thing I think you learn from Darby O'Gill and the little people.
Because that's his main. That's the main way he trips up. Both times. I mean, the second time it works in his favor.
Yes,
but the first time he catches King Brian, King Brian fools him. So
Aye.
yeah, I think out of all of them, this definitely gives you, and plus this movie also gives you like more of a kind of more, what am I trying to say, more Irish mythology than the rest of them.
It does.
It
lays it on thick.
Yeah, and you've got a few different. You've got the puka, you've got the leprechauns, you have the banshee. You're
You got
getting
the
a
death
bit more.
coach.
You've got the death coach as well. Yeah, at least we forget. So yeah, you're getting a lot more kind of in depth, and you're finding out a lot more about these creatures. So
yeah. Darby O'Gill and the Little People provides you with a broader education, perhaps, than the other two films do, about the general world of the fair folk. Would you say?
Yep, it's
okay.
It's exactly like life in Ireland.
Yeah. So if any characters from these movies were going to hold a course and be a lecturer on any of these, on getting away from or dealing with the fairy folk, Darby O'Gill himself is probably the best man to handle it, I'd say, out of all these guys.
I would love him to be my professor.
Indeed, he would not. It'd be so easy to get an A in his class because he'd just be like, I can't be fucked. He'd just give everybody an A or whatever, go down the pub. Yeah. So Darby O'Gill then goes in the vault in our hearts and in our bunker. If so officially both cases we're back to picking the same film for both. Now
sometimes it happens. It's
I'd say 60% to 70% of the time
we have a very scientific approach, and sometimes the best movie is also the most educational.
Yeah, sometimes science is an art. We'll say that.
Although not in the Hallow's case.
Okay, right. So what we're going to do now then is, I guess we'll try to make friends with these little nightmares. You play a tune and we'll be careful with our wishes. Good idea. Okay, right. So that's all we have time for today. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at 7 Day Apocalypse. That's at numeral 7 Day Apocalypse. Our email address, if you want to contact us or just whine at us, is filmcast@thisweeksapocalypse.com. That is filmcast@thisweeksapocalypse.com. Okay, John, get your guitar ready, all right? And we will see you, hopefully, if we're alive, we'll see you next Monday. Bye!
Slang ahoy!
Sludger!